So I have a serious question for you. Now, we can talk and argue all we want about what's the best, Disney property turned into a video game, right? You know, your Darkwing Ducks, your Chip and Dales, that sort of thing. They all have their own version, whether it was on Nintendo or Sega and so on. But here's the big question. What do you think is the best? I mean, the tippity top S tier Disney, the cartoon, not the video game, but the cartoon intro song.
Well, you're probably talking about like the big three, right? Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, DuckTales, and probably Darkwing Duck? You're gonna probably go with those three?
My short list is DuckTales, Chip and Dale's, Darkwing Duck, and Tailspin.
Okay.
That's my short list. 4.
Tailspin's a jam.
It's such a jam. Oh, we a. Come on. Oh, we oh. Come on, you guys suck. It's a good song.
It's probably been a long time since I've actually listened to the Tailspin.
Tailspin. Come on.
No, I mean I don't remember the theme music to that one too much. I probably have to go
makes
back
me
and
sad.
I mean, it's fine.
Go listen to it later today.
I'll probably pull up YouTube and everything. Put it on Spotify.
Put it on Spotify.
It'd be a hell of a thing if there's a whole like list on Spotify.
There's no way there's not.
Of just
there has to
80s and 90s like after school cartoons.
If there's not, I'd be disappointed.
There'd have to be. I mean, I've actually looked at like some top like 15 like 80s cartoon theme musics, but I mean, for me, it's how do you get away from the top two of DuckTales and Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers? Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, Chip and Dale's when there's danger.
So
come on.
The emotional response, the emotional like how I feel is Chip and Dale's is the best one, but that's because it was the first one for me. Because I feel like Chip and Dale's came before DuckTales, but I'm not 100% sure for me. Do you guys remember?
You might be right.
I feel like it did, but if I was put a gun to my head and say, "Listen, motherfucker, you're gonna pick 3, like top 3." DuckTales is number 1. Because it's so good.
the bass line itself just slaps.
Boom, 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 boom. It just starts good. Like it has a jam right in.
Yeah, I think for me, DuckTales has to be number 1.
DuckTales is number 1.
Without
well, what's
question.
number 2?
I mean, of those 4, I would probably go with Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers.
Chip and Dale's. If I had to put it on it wouldn't even be on. It would be my 3.
Wouldn't even be your 3?
It would not be my 3. But I will say 3. If I had to put it on a list, it would be 3. And number 2 is definitely Darkwing Duck.
Darkwing Duck was so good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would rank them DuckTales, Rescue Rangers, Darkwing Duck as number 3.
Goof Troop wasn't bad, but it was starting to creep out of my interest in that sort of thing. But it was a good song. All those songs were good.
There was a lot of like shows that didn't last long that had great theme songs, like Bonkers.
I never really got into Bonkers.
Yeah, but the song fucking slaps.
I don't remember it whatsoever at all. I know it existed.
Bonkers. Yeah, totally nuts. Bonkers. No ifs, ands, or buts. Going bonkers.
Oh, shit.
That was like spoken word, Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff, I didn't realize we signed up for a poetry slam here today.
So, okay. DuckTales, Darkwing Duck, and Chip and Dale's. Honorable mention to Tailspin, because I swear Tailspin is superior to Chip and Dale's.
It might be. I just don't have like an active recollection of it.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you not like Tailspin?
No, I watched every episode.
Kick Cloud Kicker.
Yeah, Cloud Kicker was. So you had that block, which kids today, don't quite understand.
Yeah,
like coming home from school,
the same.
It was a big deal.
You had the Disney animation block right after school from like 4 to 6 before the news kicked in, that had Rescue Rangers and DuckTales and Tailspin. And then probably some other show. Darkwing Duck was more of a Saturday morning cartoon, I think, at that stage. But maybe Batman the Animated Series, if this was all on Fox, because you only had a couple channels.
You only watched Fox. You weren't watching anything else after school.
And we're not talking about like the other animated songs here, everybody, because if we did, Jones would be tripping over left and right with X-Men the Animated Series.
Their entire YouTube channel is devoted to how good that fucking song is.
I'm not saying there isn't.
How could you not?
I'm not.
That is S tier all day in every category.
S tier
who seems to
every
believe
category.
That show was not S tier, and I wonder who the fuck that is.
I stand by it.
This week on Nothing Good.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We got you on that one.
Got
Did
him.
we though?
I'm not sure how we got
I don't
you,
know
but
if
we
did,
got
if we
you.
didn't.
Apparently.
You know when you watching Game of Thrones did this once, where every time a Game of you gotta fucking love how I just
Wait
go
a
with this
minute.
shit. No.
We're a podcast about retro things, and like Game of Thrones did this once.
Listen, Game of
Yo.
Thrones is starting to encroach into retro territory.
Almost.
Almost. Look, if we did Hellblade, I almost said Beyblade. If we did
Hey,
Hellblade,
Hey!
let's just play
I
Beyblades today.
man, let's go ahead and take this from the top. No, if we talked about Hellblade, we could talk about Game of Thrones. Jesus Christ!
No, but it was different because Hellblade was this contained experience. The only reason I wanted to even talk about it was because it was so fucking good. Game of Thrones, we could talk about it, but we gotta wait a while.
Oh, I'm not going balls deep into Game of Thrones here, right? I'm not going like Littlefinger deep into Game of Thrones.
Just
here.
the tip?
Just
Is
the
that
just
what
the
you're
tip.
doing?
I feel like Littlefinger's just a tip type of guy.
Probably. No, but the Game of Thrones did this once, where every single time that show started, it went right into the intro, into the whole thing. The song, the epic music from Game of Thrones, the cool intro, all the buildings popping up, all the locations and shit. We all know. We've all seen it. And if you haven't, where the fuck have you been? And if you haven't watched Game of Thrones, stop after season 7.
No, watch the whole fucking thing. It's worth it.
no.
It's worth it.
At least so you know
need some
what
closure on
everyone's pissed
something.
about. Yeah.
They may not need that kind of closure. A lot of people didn't need that closure,
You know,
Jones.
one day we will talk about Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
and we will have this discussion because I maintain the ending was not as bad as everybody made it seem.
That's a whole podcast.
That's what
man.
I'm saying.
So I'm not going to start down that rabbit hole. But there was one episode famously on the show where it went right into the show. Because there was a very popular character on the show that was presumed dead, and he didn't die. And that was the first time and only time on the show where it went right into the episode and didn't actually do an intro. Which is what we did here today, ladies and gentlemen. And that was the episode when the Hound, was found building a church.
The Hound was found.
The Hound.
Yeah. Sandor Clegane.
I'll have 2 chickens. For some reason, when I think of the Hound, that's all I think about. I'll have 2 chickens. That's
Anyways.
that's the scene that is to me. That's Clegane, Clandorus, whatever the hell his name is.
Sandor Clegane.
Sandor. Was it Sandor?
Sandor, yeah.
Clegane, Sandor.
Sandor Clegane.
Sandor Clegane. I had it backwards. Sandor
Send
Clegane.
me the big woman.
I'll have 2 chickens. You know what scene that is? You guys remember that scene?
I'm trying to remember
It's
that
the
scene.
scene. It's early in the series.
Jones says 3 words and he looks at me just dead in the eye and goes, "Don't you remember the scene?"
Don't you remember? It's so good.
4 words. I'll have 2
Because
chickens.
it was all about intent. It was such a badass scene. That's why I remember it. Is when Arya was still very young and she hadn't really been killing too many people yet.
Oh, they were on the road, right?
Yeah, it was very early, and they went to this shop. It was like in a restaurant, whatever, an inn, and there was a bunch of Kingsmen, white. I don't know if they were in white cloaks or not. Just kind of there.
Probably Lannisters.
Yeah, and they're just sitting around, and Arya and the Hound are sitting there and they're eating, just trying to rest. And there's one motherfucker who's eyeing them up. And, you see the Hound, you know the Hound. If you've seen him before, you know him when you see him.
Yeah, they're big motherfuckers.
And dude starts talking to the Hound like, "Oh, you're the Hound, aren't you?" And Sandor's just looking at him like, "Yeah, I am." Blah blah blah. And he goes, "Oh, weren't you with the king?" This is after the Battle of Blackwater. He bounced, right?
Yeah.
Like he got the fuck out of Dodge. There's too much fire for him.
Way too much fire.
And his
for
last
him.
words were, "Fuck the king, I'm out." Right? And the whole scene is like this. They're talking about food. They're talking about this interaction they're having with like what's going on back at King's Landing. But the whole time, Sandor was eyeing this dude up like, I will murder you. But dude's like, there's like so many of us, it's just like 2 of you. And there's a scene where Sandor is like, you're gonna get me a chicken. Like, and he takes his drink and he just chugs this fucking beer, his ale. Glug, 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 slowly glug, glug. Everybody's just looking at him, glug, glug. And he puts it down. And I'll have 2 chickens. And he goes, "If you don't shut your cunt mouth, I'm gonna have every chicken in this room." And like what he's trying to say with this whole scene. And then they end up murdering everybody. I think it's the first time Arya killed somebody, or the second time, with Needle. But the scene is so badass. Thanks, Clover.
Jesus Christ. Anyways, welcome to the show, everybody.
Yeah, Google the Hound. I'll have 2 chickens.
Guys,
YouTube it.
I think this is the best start of a show we've had. I'm just gonna put it down there right now.
2 chickens.
We got a dog hacking something up in the other room, which you may or may not have heard, but we heard it.
Oh,
and
man,
it was
we heard it.
amazing. Because you're just kind of waiting. It reminded me of Christmas Vacation when like the dog ate like all the bones and stuff out of the garbage. He's like, he's like,
You
oh,
know
there's
it's
the bone
coming,
stuck
but
in there.
you're just waiting for it. Yeah.
And then, oh, he got it up. So there's a little of that going on in the other room. Welcome to Nothing Good, ladies and gentlemen. Guys, what are we drinking today?
Oh, we're going to get this out of the way early. Because
Good call.
last week we waited until we were about to close the shit down. And we're like, oh yeah, by the way, we're drinking today. So we're going to start the office episode off with what we're drinking. So I am drinking a beer called Red Ferrari, which is a hazy double IPA from the Vale in Richmond, Virginia.
Also, taking it back to Game of Thrones there. From the Vale.
The Vale,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm drinking a 2X Haze from Southern Tier. Yet another week of drinking Southern Tier. I'm almost done with the Southern Tier
So
in my
close.
refrigerator.
You're so close to the...
There's
light at the end of the tunnel, Jones.
There's just like 3 cans left in the fridge.
Now-
So this time in 3 months, I'll be on another beer.
So when Jones brought the beers in, were they frozen solid,
No,
Jones,
they
or just frozen enough?
they. So what happened? What had happened was I took the beers out of my fridge, and I guess they were just cold enough that the agitation caused the beers to freeze. Now there are witnesses to this because when I brought the beers out of my bag, they were still liquid, but me setting them down and moving them around a lot, they just froze.
Instantly froze.
And it froze fucking solid.
I've seen that shit on like YouTube videos and stuff. I've never seen it happen in real life. It was kind of one of those things where it's like, am I being an asshole if I try this at home? Like,
Well,
like nobody's ever openly
Yeah.
talked about it.
I saw this on Mr. Wizard once as a kid.
Definitely Bill Nye.
Shout out to fucking Mr. Wizard. Holy... I don't know if anybody's invoked that fucker's name in the last 30 years, but...
Mad respect for Mr. Wizard.
If we said Mr. Wizard 2 more times, is he going to pop up?
Yo, best episode of Mr. Wizard, still to this day, is still one of the things that just blew my fucking mind. To this day, as a grown-ass man, it was he had an aquarium, like a container of water. You guys have probably seen this one. He puts his powder on fucking top, and he puts his hand into the fucking water, moves it around, brings it back up, his hands are bone fucking dry. And as a little kid... That shit, like,
Mind blown.
changed
Fucking
my life.
science.
Fucking science.
It's funny, like a lot of people don't really talk about Mr. Wizard, but
I don't
you
know
watch
why.
there are a lot of things that you watch on TV where Mr. Wizard is definitely like referenced. Like that Professor Proton in Big Bang Theory. SNL does a famous thing where they have like the host is playing a scientist and they have 2 kids that have no fucking clue why they're on TV.
They're like, okay, I'll hold the screwdriver.
Oh,
And-
those are some of the SNL, say what you want to say about SNL. Those are some of the better skits if you like, especially when Adam Driver hosts. He plays a pissed off scientist so well. But like
It's oddly specific.
I mean, it's a really. I think it's Adam Driver.
40 years worth of SNL. You're like, but this one time, Adam Driver was really funny as an angry scientist.
No, but it's one of their like few recurring bits they have on the show where they had like it was like Cecily Strong and then I think it was Mikey Day were like the 2 students that were like helping him out, and the way that they play off of the Mr. Wizard character is really fucking funny.
So basically, for those of you who are too young to have ever been...
If you have no idea what the fuck we're talking
like, what the
about.
fuck is Mr. Wizard?
It's pretty much the entire podcast is us talking about things you probably have no idea what the fuck we're talking about.
Before Bill Nye the Science Guy, that was Mr. Wizard, and it was on Nickelodeon.
Yep.
I didn't watch Bill Nye the Science Guy at all. I did not watch it one bit. I actually knew what it was, but I didn't know. I had no clue what it really was until well after it was like a thing.
You want to talk about a banger of an entrance song, a banger of theme music, the Bill Nye the Science Guy.
No, Mr. Wizard. I think that's what it was. It was really stupid. But there was like this period where Nickelodeon was trying some interesting things, putting like these different shows on, like Nick Arcade and things like that.
Oh man, I love Nick Arcade.
Nick Arcade, the greatest show that you think you'd have excelled at, you'd have been shitty at like everybody else. I promise you. Every little kid goes, I can do better than that. I guarantee you put our little asses on camera in front of a crew and a green screen.
And a studio audience.
And a fucking green screen and ask you to jump and hop and you're trying to look at the monitor and go like, how do I jump? Where am I going? You'd look like a fucking asshole too. All those little kids look like morons. All of them. But it looked like so much fun. Anyhow.
Yeah, Mr. Wizard. Mr. Wizard's World was the name of the show on Nickelodeon. Sadly passed away in 2007 at the age of 90.
You know what? I'm going to drink for Mr. Wizard.
But those shows are all still available on YouTube. So check them out. Mad respect for Mr. Wizard. Mm-hmm. He always wore like a red or brown sweater with like a collared shirt underneath it.
He was very Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Good dude.
Does it say?
Donald Jeffrey Herbert, better known as Mr. Wizard.
I knew that. Only because my name is Herbert, I knew that. Because in the ending credits, I would see that name. That's fucking right. Ah, Mr. Wizard. Good shit. Yeah. All right, we're not here to talk about Mr. Wizard, though.
No.
I'm drinking. Sorry, I had to interject. I didn't get to talk about what I'm drinking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We were just waiting for you to say it.
Yeah. No, so before we even get into the topic, I'm still recovering from my my plague at this stage, I think is a good way to call it. So since we had a lot of talk in the last episode about Pittsburgh and its influence on Beetlejuice and St. Patrick's Day parades and just Yinzers in general, I thought it'd be really appropriate to bring probably the most Yinzer thing I could bring to a podcast drink when it's not an Iron City. But I brought some Turner's iced tea. And I'll pour a little bit out here for Noah Brown because I know Noah's a big Turner's guy.
Yeah, Turner's is a thing. Here.
The look of disgust on your face as you said that.
No, before
tells you all you need to know about Turner's iced tea. It comes in a carton like you're in elementary school cafeteria.
Yes.
Yeah. And it tastes like cardboard.
It really does. Actually, it was explaining to the guys before we even started. I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm just drinking cardboard. I'm pretty convinced of it.
Tea flavored cardboard.
Tea flavored
just
cardboard.
Chewing on it.
But it makes me feel close to home.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So.
Respect.
Yeah, respect.
So we are here to talk about Nintendo. Specifically, the Nintendo Entertainment System. Specifically, for many of us, our first real console that we owned.
Yep.
Was it your first real console?
Technically, it was my first console. It was not the first console that was in my house. We had an Atari that was my sister's. That I barely remember, but it did happen. It did exist. But the Nintendo was mine. I got it for Christmas in like '89, I think. Yeah,
if you look at kids who grew up in our generation who are our age, Atari came out before we were born. And if you look at the way the video game market was, so there was this big surge in the market from like the late 70s into the early 80s. And in 83, it crashed. So everyone was like, video games is a fad. It's a trend. Like, it's not going to last. They stopped really focusing on what people were doing with Atari and home consoles. And everyone was going to the arcades because like mall culture was a big thing. And so Nintendo started working on development for Famicom and ultimately the NES in the early 80s. And even though the market crashed, they're like, we still think there's like a place for a home console that's somewhat affordable, even though it wasn't, super inexpensive. So they kept working and kept plugging away at building the NES, which they brought to the US market as a test in, I think, Christmas of '85. They only released it in New York, and there was a limited number of consoles. And then they did a bunch of like market research and follow up with those people who bought them. And then it officially launched in the U.S. on September 27th, 1986.
Sounds about right.
Over the life cycle of the console, it sold 60 million units. So a lot of people had NESs in their houses over the years. Some people got it right away. You mentioned you got it a few years later. Yeah. I think I probably got it, 86, probably 88, 87 or 88. What about you, Dave?
Well, the Nintendo wasn't mine, famously. It was my brother's. So my brother is 9 years older than I am. So, you're talking about, probably 87, around the time that my brother probably got it. So I was 5, so my brother was probably 14,
Man,
around
he's
that
old.
point in time.
He's
I
fucking
know,
old.
man.
When you
I
say
know.
it like that,
Yeah.
in my brain, I'm like, oh, yeah, because I was like 6 years old. I was like 5 years old. No, that motherfucker was like almost a grown-ass man.
Yeah. Well, so that was actually a key advantage in the Nintendo Entertainment System because my brother was a phenomenal athlete. Really, really was. And I hate saying that. He'll never listen to this, but so I don't really have to worry about him coming back and saying, I heard about the time you're talking about being a really good athlete. But like my brother famously decided that he didn't want to play sports anymore. He wanted to like get a car and like work and have a job and stuff. And one of the first jobs my brother got was Toys R Us. And he was, Jeff, before you and I were, my brother was working the booth at the R Zone at Toys R Us.
Respect.
Way, way, way before we started poking our nose around there, So that was one of the first things that we were able to do is that my brother, when he worked, would buy fucking Nintendo games. So we had a lot in the household.
You're a very lucky man. Very lucky.
Look, I look back as we were kind of going over this episode and I was going over some Nintendo lists and doing some research and things like that on just different games. I realized how many games we actually owned. And to my mother, God love her, Barbie Mac has made one mistake in my life. Well, 2. First was having me. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, then. Get right
The
to
first was your brother. The second was you.
The first mistake was when she sold all of the toys.
Such an awful thing to do.
Yeah,
that was short-sighted.
That's brutal.
Yes.
And why we say that, ladies and gentlemen, is that my mom babysat a lot of kids growing up. So we had a lot of different kids coming in and out of the house, kids from the neighborhood and stuff like that, before school, after school, So we had a lot of toys in the house. And my mom also would famously work at Toys R Us. And she bought extras of things because, if kids are playing with Transformers and Optimus Prime breaks, we got to back up Optimus Prime. The toys never broke, guys. The toys never broke. So the day that my mom and my sister went down to Groovy in the South Side with a tired Jeep full of action figures, there were in-box unopened Optimus Prime, in-box unopened Soundwave, in-box unopened He-Man, in-box unopened G.I. Joe. Fucking you name it, there are boxes full of it. Now, they sold this stuff in the late 90s for over $1,000 to a secondhand store. So, of course, $1,000...
You could get $1,000 for those 3 Transformers you just named.
I know. I'm fully aware. Not to mention like all the other open box stuff that we had that was all in great condition.
Yeah.
We're talking Star Wars. We're talking G.I. Joe, Transformers, Ghostbusters, just to name a few.
I'm gonna drink one for all those action figures and the money you could have
all
made.
the Ninja Turtles, like everything, right? So the other was the day at the garage sale that she sold the Nintendo and all the games. And we probably had in our household at least 35 Nintendo games, maybe even up to 40. Some great ones, some ones that you probably never heard of, Tiger Heli, 1942, Spy Hunter. You had your classics, all the Marios, Metroid, Zelda, all the Mega Man games, Duck Hunt, the just original Mario Brothers, not Super Mario Brothers, just the ones where you're jumping through fucking pipes. Castlevania, Gradius, Contra. I mean, I can just keep going on right now, guys. And I was too young to be able to buy it back. And the reason why I say this is that a couple years later, my mom tried to sell my Legos.
What?
Yeah. Barb went through a phase where she's like purging the garage.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Dave's in his 30s this whole time.
Oh, man, that's even funnier. No, but I was like probably like 12 years old or something. And my mom's like, I'm selling the Legos. And I went to the garage sale and I pulled all the money out of my piggy bank and I bought it all back.
You will not.
So the Legos are the one thing that did not get sold.
That's right.
So they still have.
That's where he draws a line in the sand. He's like, I am making a stand for these fucking Legos.
Yeah,
and they are mine,
exactly.
even if I have to buy them twice.
Sidebar, real quick, because I love my sidebars. What was your go-to action figure? Everybody had their go-to action figure for everything. He was always your protagonist. Everybody had the one who was always the hero. Who was yours? Think about it. We don't have to answer right now. We'll come back later.
I think I can pull mine up pretty easily.
Yeah, we had growing up with 3 boys in the house, and me and my brothers are all a year apart, so we had a lot of toys and a lot of action figures. So they were like bins and bins. So it was never just like one, but it was typically like the Ninja Turtles who were fighting Monstar, which was the villain from
Jesus.
Silverhawks.
Yes.
Oh, Silver fucking Hawks,
Had
kids.
those too, man.
Yeah. Or like the Centurions like would join in, like all these like sort of this mishmash team. But Turtles was always my go-to. I wasn't. Me and my brothers, none of us were really like G.I. Joe kids.
No.
No, we were more into Turtles and Ghostbusters and He-Man and what came after that.
Yeah. Mine wasn't actually a character. It was a playset. It was Ghostbusters Firehouse. The
That's
Ghostbusters Firehouse got used for everything. It got used for Turtles. It got used for obviously Ghostbusters. It got used for He-Man. It got used for fucking things called expanders. If you guys even remember what those things were. Ultraman. It just got used for everything. So if I had a specific character, it was probably Leonardo. Because all of us, I think, grew up in that age where just the Turtles were everything.
Cuck.
He's kind of a cunt.
A little bit.
Explains a lot.
Well, I will tell you, my protagonist for almost everything. Like, I had the luxury of being the only boy in the house, so action figure, all the action figures were mine, and I didn't care. As long as it was a franchise I liked, give me all the action figures. But the one that I had, not the longest, but almost the longest, who stuck it out with me, and I still own to this very fucking day. And matter of fact, when we lived together way back in the day, I had them on display on my bookshelf. Do you guys remember Visionaries? Does that even ring a bell? Visionaries? Yo, so,
No.
okay.
I'm thinking.
They were designed like the G.I. Joes, like the super articulation. Same deal with the little fucking rubber band inside. If it snapped, you had to perform open heart surgery to fix that shit.
Yeah.
But they had holograms on their chests, like stickers, with like they were superpowers. It was so I'm pretty confident Visionaries
Were they animals?
different creatures, animals.
Yes, I did. I did
Visionary.
have those. I never knew they were called.
They were called Vision. You know why? Because
thought
it was one of those situations where it was a toy then a cartoon.
I thought they were called battle beasts.
Visionaries.
Huh.
Yes.
Yeah, because they had the little hologram thing that you'd have to
They
hold
had
your thumb
armor.
on. They had armor, their animals and stuff. And then when you put
Well,
your
no. They were humans.
Oh no, okay, so all right, I'm thinking that I am thinking about Battle Beasts,
Yeah,
which was very similar to that. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So
Oh,
that
I did have some of these because they were like they had the
yeah.
when you pushed down and created heat on the chest emblem, it would change.
Yep.
Yeah, I do
I
remember
had. Let me
that.
see. Do you have a picture?
I'm gonna
There's
pull
the dude,
up
the
up
one
here.
with the beard. The white guy with the beard is the one I fucking had, and he's the only one that I remember owning, and he was for some reason the archetypical Kurt Russell looking motherfucker, he had the armor, he had he had the beard, he was a badass, and I
I know what you're talking about. Yep.
that was
I didn't have a lot of those.
I only have the one.
I played with them at people's houses, but we didn't really
Remember
have
that was a
those.
thing. You learned about other toys from just going and playing
Yeah.
at someone else's
Pretty wild,
house.
right?
But the segue back, and that's a good segue to how I actually found out about Nintendo was at another person's house because it had come out, and a neighbor of mine who was a friend of mine, his older brother, much like Mac, had gotten a Nintendo. I don't know if he bought it himself because he was way older than us, he was
Yeah.
high school age, way older, right? And his name was Chris. And I remember going to his house because Chris lived, like most punk-ass teenagers do, he lived in the attic. And I remember going up to the attic and seeing Nintendo and going, that was like, I couldn't wrap my head around how cool this was. He had a bunch of games. I think we played Double Dragon. We'd play Contra. We'd play Mario and stuff like that. That's when I learned the art of taking turns until you died, and then somebody else pick up the sticks. We learned that from the high school kids who showed us is how you play games with your friends.
Even if it's 2-player, you still take
Oh,
turns.
you take
yeah,
turns.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You take fucking
You get
turns.
your own controller. We're not playing at the same time.
But I
though.
remember getting the Nintendo for Christmas. It was definitely Christmas. I remember the memory is very clear of the Christmas tree, and I remember my parents, it was in the box, but they went and they bought me 3 games because it came with Mario Duck Hunt,
Correct.
and Ninja Turtles was the first not included game that I got. And I'm trying to think the third game. I couldn't even tell you now, actually, at this point, because I don't think I played it very much. But Ninja Turtles, which we're going to get to, was a motherfucker. I learned real hard.
Still is.
I learned about difficult games with Nintendo. Nintendo games are
They were not very
notoriously
forgiving.
difficult.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I did eventually get a Nintendo. The way that our house was kind of set up, I had like a really old TV that was like my mom's like best friend's father's TV that like got passed down to me like when he passed away. One of those TVs that was fully encased in wooden furniture, kind of a deal.
Man.
Kids.
Get a floor unit.
Kids, that's one of the things you got to remember is that like televisions and stuff used to be built into wooden furniture.
Yeah.
To
tune it to channel 3.
Oh yeah. So I had that because my dad got sick and tired of having to come home from work and we'd be playing Nintendo. So because like when Dad came home from work, no, Nintendo's off, TV's his for the rest of the night. So we got this TV set up in the dining room, hooked the Nintendo up, had like a little piece of furniture that we could sit on, kind of like a couch. And we're able to kind of play in the dining room, and that's all that TV was good for. And if you tune the antennas enough, you might have been able to get WQED.
Was it the dual channel changes? Like you had to turn because it was like 1 through 10, or one, and then but there was like 1 through like 100.
Yeah.
On the other dial.
It was the 1 through 10 was above, then the one like the 11 through 100 was like underneath.
That was my first TV as well. That was my Nintendo TV as well.
That was my Nintendo TV. And then of course you had the joy of trying to get the Nintendo to work. Because, with all if you want to talk about difficult gaming, everybody, yes, Nintendo games were extremely difficult. But what was more difficult and equally challenging was trying to figure out the different ways to get your Nintendo to work. Because the Nintendo Entertainment System was notoriously famous for just the games not quite playing. And you had to do all these different things in order to get the game to work. Now, the very first one, as we all know, the first move you get when you put the game in the cartridge in and you push it down, you hit power, and it's blinking.
It blinks.
That's
the thing. It always blinks.
It would always blink.
What I like to refer to this part of the discussion is as 8-bit foreplay.
Oh, I like that.
Because there's a lot of blowing, a lot of shaking, a lot of put it in real fast, pull it out real fast.
Shirt. That's 100% should be a shirt. 8-bit foreplay. I like it.
And to make it even more kinky, we use Legos at my house.
Jam that sucker in.
Just hold it down.
It's a whole experience trying to get it to work.
Yeah, so you'd always pull the game out, you'd blow into it a few times because for whatever reason, that worked. And then you put the game in, it would work. Sometimes the contraption wouldn't hold the game down. So you'd have to we had to put like a 2x4 little Lego brick in there to hold it down, to keep the game.
Or you'd have
launched.
to shift the game from one side of the console to the other, ever so gently, so that, and then hit reset real fast to see if it stops blinking.
We've come a long way.
It's a pain in the ass.
From these consoles just not
and
working.
for all of you that bitch and moan about cut scenes and download screens and refresh screens and things like that, and just when you're just waiting for the level to load, fuck you. All right, you have no fucking idea what we went through.
We had to
back in those
We
days.
had to crawl so you could walk.
We did.
That's right.
We crawled through 3 football. I'm just gonna go fucking Morgan Freeman right now. Andy Dufresne. Man crawled through 3 football fields of shit and came out on the other end clean. That's what we had to fucking do.
Yeah.
To play Nintendo.
Just to play Nintendo. To play a game that we weren't gonna beat.
And that's just the system that hooked up to the TV. Game Boy came out not too long after this, and fuck the shit we had to put on our Game Boy so we could see it and actually play it. You don't even know.
Yeah, 15 peripherals on that bitch.
You don't even know.
A magnifying glass, a flashlight.
Yep.
We built, it looked like a fucking, Power Ranger Megazord when the thing was all said and done. The amount of, things you had to add to it, man. That thing could go into war and come out of the other side and be fine.
Yeah. And the bitch about technology is, if you buy a brand new smart TV today, you can't plug an NES into it. It doesn't have the ports for it. It's all HDMI.
Right.
Well, they're starting to sell...
It's all digital. So, I got a new TV upstairs, so I put my old TV downstairs, and then none of my shit would plug into it. My NES, Super
that's
Nintendo, my
unfortunate.
Genesis. So then I had to go buy an adapter off of Amazon so I could plug all these like old school inputs in it so I could then plug that into an HDMI port. It's come a long way.
Man.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, blowing into the cartridge was like the go-to. There was I don't know how the fuck it even worked. I don't think it even actually worked.
There's a video we could shoot that we could put on like our YouTube channel on all the social media platforms. Just put Marvin Gaye over us trying to get a Nintendo game to work.
I tell you, man, 8-bit foreplay.
8-bit
foreplay.
I will wear that shirt proudly. 8-bit foreplay.
That coming soon to the Nothing Good store.
Which you should definitely check out.
8-bit foreplay. That's a new T-shirt, Jones.
That's 100%.
We just got it.
Yes, absolutely.
Just making a note.
I'm making a
it's
note.
happening.
I am designing an 8-bit foreplay
8-bit
shirt.
foreplay shirt.
Trademark.
So, speaking of 8-bit foreplay, what was your favorite 8-bit experience?
Do we want to go right to the favorites, or
What
do
else?
we,
What else are we going to talk
or do
about?
we want to
That's
work
what we're
our
talking
way?
about, right?
No, I know that, but I mean, do you want to work our way like from like 5 to 1? Do we go right at 1? I mean, are we skipping foreplay and just going right to the main
Listen,
event?
I'm always a fan of foreplay, so what you got, man?
So we kind of had a couple conversations about how we wanted this episode to go. Dear sweet, sweet Indian listener, Mumbai. That's a place in India, I think. Right?
Well, if it's
Mumbai?
not, you look like an asshole.
Mumbai?
We just lost our India listener.
Sorry, man.
Or we gained 2 more.
Or we gain 2
That
more.
point 0.00000000625% of the country,
625.
they are not tuning out. They're tuning back in.
That's right.
So we when we do these kind of favorite episodes, favorite 8-bit games and things, we kind of do a list of like 5 or 3. We kind of toss an honorable mention out there and everything. So, being that Jeff and I were probably more of the Nintendo persons, I think we have a slightly longer list than maybe Jones has. So I'll go ahead and kind of start. Jeff, do you have an honorable mention? Did you put an honorable mention with your list?
I do. And, if you look at the NES console, there were a lot of games.
So many games.
I mentioned it came out in 86. It was discontinued in 95. The last...
That's crazy.
That's a long ass time for a console to be in circulation. 716 officially licensed games.
Many of which, and then there's the unlicensed ones.
Correct. And you'll know the unlicensed ones because back in the day, and probably still today, apparently from what developers say, it's a pain in the ass to work with Nintendo because they want control over everything. So like even if they wanted their title or their license to be on the NES, they had to pay licensing fees to Nintendo. So if you see a standard gray cartridge, then they went through the process. If you see a black cartridge or a cartridge that is round instead of like jagged corners, or there's a number of like unlicensed games that were like off-color cartridges. Those did not go through the normal Nintendo protocol to get published or developed. They just did it their own way.
My mauve-colored NES cartridge of Astro Kid is not licensed through Nintendo.
No, it is not. It is not.
Well,
it is
shit.
not. So if you think of over 700 games, that's a lot of fucking games, and we're trying to narrow it down to some of our favorites. There were so many bad games.
Oh, there's a ton. I
many.
maintain there's got to be, for every 100 bad games, there's one good game.
Yeah, that's safe
Which
assumption.
means there's only like
Yeah.
7 good games.
That's a pretty safe assumption.
Which, when you go back to like the late 80s, early 90s, you didn't know if a game was going to be a good game or bad game.
No.
You had Nintendo Power Magazine, which you hoped would give you the right information about
When
a
did
game.
Nintendo Power even start? I didn't start fucking with Nintendo
In the
Power
90s.
till
It was
into
in
the
the
90s.
90s.
Right.
I had. Now, you did get the option, and it's funny, the only reason I even knew about A Boy and His Blob, or I'm jumping ahead a little bit, is because I owned a singular book that had a ton of Nintendo. It wasn't like a magazine, it was just like a book that I guess I convinced my parents to buy for me.
You got at some book fair at school.
Yeah, or something, and it had a ton of just Nintendo games and tips and tricks in it. And there's a ton of games that I'm like, oh man, I want to play that. It looks really cool. And it's funny, because A Boy and His Blob was on your list, jumping ahead yet again, but having never actually seen it, but only seen pictures,
Yeah.
and now having watched an entire Let's Play of it because I hate my life, it is a really clever game.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
actually is incredibly clever, and I wish I'd have played it when I was a kid. I wouldn't play it now, obviously, but But anyhow, sorry, I had to just throw that in there.
Yeah, so narrowing it down, like for me, I'm a Nintendo loyalist. We've talked about this.
It's unfortunate.
No, it's not.
It is.
And
I'm a
so,
Nintendo loyalist.
yeah, so like narrowing it down to 5 for me was, a bit of a challenge. I know what, my top 3 are my top 3 all time. But there were like some that I wanted to talk about, like Metroid and Castlevania and fucking Bionic Commando, which is a fantastic game. But I wanted to narrow it down to just 5 that we're going to talk about. And then also an honorable mention, and Herb alluded to it. My honorable mention is called A Boy and His Blob. Now, it's a really sort of weird game.
It is.
And it's one of those things, like, I remember, like, loving this game, even though I don't think I ever completed it as a kid. And then, as we were prepping for this episode, as we go back and watch, like, playthroughs and stuff, I'm like, man, some of these games fucking suck. I don't know why I liked it so much.
Nothing else to compare it to, that's why.
Yeah. And this particular game is one of those. It's a very weird game. Basically, the game is called A Boy and His Blob, Trouble in Boblonia. And it's basically a boy and a blob working through the world. And you can't...
Just trying to make it.
There's no actions. There's no jumping. It's like a half platform, half puzzle game. And they're basically... The premise is there are... I don't even know the number. Probably 100 different flavors of jelly beans. And each flavored jelly bean gives the blob a different function.
Yeah, different
so,
ability.
So like one turns them into a ladder, one turns them into a trampoline, one turns them into an umbrella so you can jump off a cliff. And the absurdity of it, and it's so simple. And I remember as a kid, like, we had it, and you can't save a lot of games back in the NES days. So like you'd be playing it for a few hours and feel like you're not getting anywhere. And I don't think I ever completed the game in its entirety, but it was such a unique experience because, most of the games that were out were action type platformers, sports games, stuff like that. But I remember spending a lot of time playing this game, and really, like, it's sort of intriguing when you're trying to figure out the puzzle piece of it, because there's no map. There's not really a guide that says, hey, here's, all the jelly beans and what each of them do. Like, you basically have a notebook and you start writing stuff down. So, like, you remember what...
the old days we had to write
so
things
you, like,
down.
you remember, like, what's what. But it... And, I watched a replay of it. And one of the things is, like, the song, it gets stuck in your head. Like, the music to the game. But I think if you play through the entirety of the game, it's, I don't know, a few hours. It's the same 15-second song over and over and over and over and over.
Right.
It never changes. But it was such a unique title, compared to a lot of the other games that are on my list.
It was ambitious for what it was trying to be. And again,
and it was so unique.
And it's weird because, like, once I saw the name, I went, that doesn't... Because when we, in our little text group, I saw the name of the game, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. And then I Googled it first, and I saw the first screenshot. I went, I always wanted to play this. I remember this.
It's a fun game.
And then and then to sit down and watch it and go, this is so much more than I thought it was. Like, it was just, it's weird to have this in your head for decades, what you think a game is going to be, and then you finally sit down and watch the gameplay, and it's nothing like I thought.
Yeah.
And it was really ambitious and very creative, because you're not shooting
it was
anything.
different. Yeah.
You're not platforming really. Everything that you do is because of your blob who helps you do things.
Yeah, a blob from
you
outer
have to feed
space.
him first, and then he becomes like a little portal you can drop down, or becomes a bridge for you, and just random stuff.
Yeah, it was real random. And I guess they made a remake in the early 2000s, like a modern day remake. Some indie developer made it. I never played it, but I think it was worth bringing up that game just because it was so sort of out there.
It was very out there.
But it's a fun game.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about with the Nintendo system that it made a lot of things possible that were not possible before with other types of video game systems. Atari was very limited on what kind of games you could really play. A lot of it took place on one screen. Games like Pac-Man and Galaga and things like that. There wasn't a lot of stuff moving around. you had Pitfall where, you could start kind of moving around and things like that. But
Yeah, it's similar to Hellblade, where all you can do is walk during parts of the game.
Yeah,
It just looks a lot better.
yeah.
The experience is a lot better.
But Nintendo, the playing field opened. Like the sandbox became a thing. And, what kinds of different games could you really kind of come up with because of what the computing capacity was. Yeah. And that game was certainly... I remember playing it. It wasn't one that I owned. I think my buddy Bill had it. Maybe Mike Aniskevich had it. I can't remember who, but we played that game, and it's just wild because, again, there's no, this is what you're supposed to do with the blob, and these are all the things you can. You just have to figure it out, and that's part of the fun of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was also like a pain in the ass, like, because you had to scroll through hit select and scroll through the menu of, like, all the different jelly beans that you've collected.
Yeah.
And you can't just, like, open up a menu and pick it. It's literally like every time you hit it, it just scrolls through one at a time.
Yeah.
It's like, this is so fucking tedious.
Like as
now,
a child, you were like all about it.
Yeah. You're like, this is a great way to just, kill a few hours. Now it's like, oh, this is annoying. Why did I like this as a kid?
I feel like, and that's an interesting point. Gaming, in the 80s, it functioned as a way to kill time. Like, yeah, there might have been some very bare bones story involved, like, oh, you saved the princess, or like, my favorite, like, ghouls and ghosts. Was it goblins and ghouls? Is it ghouls and ghosts?
Ghosts and goblins.
Ghosts and goblins.
I'm never gonna get it right. That game, where like, yo, my man is about to get diggy with this maiden, and then like she gets abducted.
Yeah, she gets abducted by Satan.
That is like the most real motivation and story in any Nintendo game I've ever actually seen.
When Satan steals your girl, you're gonna fight some.
Especially when you were about. You were listen.
You were naked. Yes.
Yeah, the coin purse was out. You were about to go to town.
Pound Town population you, bro, was about to happen, and then all of a sudden, Satan at a perfect time.
Yeah. Satan
takes your demon takes your chick.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
And you were about ready to murder an entire like catalog of mythical creatures in order to get your dick wet.
But yeah, so those games.
Is there any more greater motivation in this world than that? Precisely my point.
But yeah, but those games I think they existed to kill time. Games now, man, like exist to like make you think, make you feel, and make you question.
Yeah, you got to commit.
You have to commit, and it's weird because like when we were kids. I know we've all had, I know you motherfuckers who are listening had this experience at least once. If you're old enough to, when you're playing a game, it's a weekend or it's it's not a school night or it's whatever, it's summertime and you're playing a game. You've been playing it all afternoon, maybe or late morning, early afternoon. And mom's like, yo, go outside for a while. Like, you need to go outside. And then you go outside. But you've paused that motherfucker because you were going to beat Double Dragon tonight. You were going to do it. You've not done it yet. You've been working on it, and you come home and it's just off.
Yeah, there's no save file.
And and your mom's like, yo, I had to vacuum. And you're like,
yeah,
but you could have just kept it on.
Yeah.
Like, what?
There weren't power strips at that point in time. There's one plug.
There was one plug.
Some shit.
And the Nintendo was on the chopping block. It was every single time. I have very vivid negative memories and emotions about my mom unplugging the Nintendo, turning that some bitch off. Do you pay the electric bill? No, I don't. And that is the equalizer because you got nothing.
There's no comeback to that. You don't even know what an electric bill is.
You're just like A, B, up, down, left, right. That's what I got.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back outside.
You said you want me to go outside, right? I'm gonna go out there right now. I'm just gonna get yelled at otherwise.
Yes.
It's funny that you say that, Jones, because in my household we had a very strict limit on how long you're allowed to play the Nintendo or the Super Nintendo when we got into that world. It was an hour.
That's not a good time to do anything.
It was a very strict time limit, and it was in the morning because it's like, all right, you wake up, maybe 9. I was a sleeper, like Jeff. I think your kids are sleepers too. Mm-hmm. So I would usually sleep in pretty late, and Mike Aniskevich. My childhood best friend, my mom babysat him for the first 11, 12 years of his life. And Mike had Nintendo time when I was sleeping. So his hour was like from 9 to 10 when he'd come over to the house. Then I'd wake up and my time was 10 to 11, eat lunch, get the fuck out. And then you're outside playing until your dad comes home and yells for you because it's dinner or the streetlights are coming on. And I don't want to see you unless you have gushing blood or bones protruding from your body. And those kind of happened a few times, or pretty close to, and I would still get in trouble for that, because how dare I interrupt my mother because I fell out of a tree. and somebody's like, they fell out of a tree, you hurt pretty bad. And she yelled at me, why did you fall out of the tree? This is
Didn't you tell that tree not to drop you?
This is turning into a therapy session. I'm sorry. But we only had about an hour, maybe an hour and a half tops, because, video game time was in the morning, and then sleepovers. That was the other time that you could play video games whenever you wanted to.
Real quick. Hold that thought.
Holding it.
I've been, for the last 50 or so minutes, trying to think of what my dad had me dig. It's an off-camera conversation we were having about our childhood memory.
You
a
just
cesspool.
remembered?
That's what it was called, a cesspool.
No.
Anyhow, as you were, Dave.
Oh, shit.
I've been thinking about it
Someday
all this
we'll explain that.
That's going to be the introduction to the next episode of the podcast.
Doc's cesspool conversation.
Cesspool, a retrospect.
It's his cesspool.
My dad will pretend never happened, but it fucking
Herb
happened.
Jones. Yeah, but like sleepovers were the other time where you could really have infinite video game time. And that was one of the things that, I don't know what kids do at sleepovers nowadays. Probably just watch videos of shit on tablets and stuff like that. But, the big thing that you would do is you go over to somebody else's house that had a whole different set of games than you did. And you'd be exposed to things you never thought were cool before. Or that you get to try things. Or maybe if you were really lucky for a sleepover, you'd be able to go down to the video store, rent a game, maybe get a movie, right? Until like my dad would come down at 3 o'clock in the morning and tell us to shut up and all go to bed.
Yeah.
He's sleeping.
Yeah.
Right.
In full tighty whities, by the way.
Well, that's how dads rolled back in those
Dads had
days.
no shame. Undershirt, tighty whities, world to just expose to everybody, And we all grew up sort of fine, I guess. I don't know.
Did we though?
Probably
Because
not.
I don't do that. I wouldn't do that. So that tells me.
I'm surprised, Jeff,
Yeah.
you don't have like a white t-shirt and just tighty whities, so you can't torture your kids the way that you were tortured by your dad back in the day.
That's true, but I don't. No, I keep the pants on.
Yeah.
But going back to sleepover, so you're asking what kids do now. They will all be on their phones or their tablets playing the same game together in the same room, but they're all in the same room.
At least they're gaming together.
So they're not really even talking. They're just head down in their devices. But they are gaming still. It's just a lot different than it used to be.
Not everybody's not staring at the same TV, like yelling and telling you what to do, kind of deal.
Yeah.
But,
the old days.
So, my honorable mention, as we're kind of getting down the rabbit hole here, and this was one of the first games we bought for the Nintendo system that I remember. It came out in 1987. Was a gem of a video game called Wizards and Warriors. Now, Wizards and Warriors is, as you said, Jones, this is one of those games that is your basic video game template. You're a knight, there are princesses, you have to save damsels in distress from monsters that have invaded your kingdom, kind of a deal. And this game is an interesting kind of gameplay because you're just a knight in regular armor, and you're going through the land, slaying beasts and monsters and things like that. But the thing that really kind of sets this game apart for me is the soundtrack. Now, if you don't know the soundtrack to Wizards and Warriors, everybody, it's a total fucking banger. It really, really is. It's one of the things that even to this day, it's one of the most iconic soundtracks to me in video game lore. And it's one that you probably don't really ever know of or think about. But as Jeff said, when you're playing a game where the music is the same song over and over again every 15 seconds, having different levels and things where things change really, really kind of lends home. And I just love this game, I think mainly because of the music, and I liked it so much I would just play the game over and over again. And it was hard to kind of always get through, because when you die, you're starting over at the beginning of the level. And, if you keep dying enough, you get to the point where you shut the game off, you want to try something else, right? But this was just kind of one of those games. You had to collect gems throughout the level.
Dude, what Nintendo game? Almost every game, I swear, you had to collect gems or coins of some sort.
Right.
That was like the thing.
Because in video games at this point in time, everybody too, a high score was still apparently important.
Yeah.
Although you couldn't save it, so it didn't really matter.
Could.
Very few games you could actually save anything.
Yeah. In the arcade, it mattered. At home, it did not.
But you'd have to go explore these levels because there were doors that you couldn't open, and there were treasure chests you couldn't open unless you had a certain type of key that was the color of the chest or the door, and you'd have to kind of go through the level and do it in a certain order. Your character did have power-ups. You know, you would get the flower of, or the leaf of, or the feather of levitation, or the potion of levitation, and the feather would help you like kind of glide in these levels where your character had to drop, and if you dropped far enough, your character could like die. But it was just a really interesting kind of like old school 2-dimensional side scroller, but it was really interesting and fun, and I just. When I think back in Nintendo, I have such fond memories of playing that game. It was probably one of the first games I ever beat, too. But
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So
it reminds me of like Gauntlet, like the arcade version of Gauntlet, because it's that same sort of vibe, just presented a little differently.
Yeah. And you get these potions, and when the potion music kicked in, that was the number one hit of that game. And some of the potions would help you jump faster, would help you be like invisible or invincible, to do different things in the game. But and there's some cool like level villains that you had to beat too. Nothing like crazy, but like monsters and shit. It was just a really fun game. You ever get a chance to go back and play that one, everybody? It was the first of a trilogy. Of 2 other games that were really not as good as
That's
that
how it
one.
usually goes. Yeah.
No. But yeah, it's the first of a trilogy of games, and definitely one of my faves.
Okay. What did you say it was called?
Wizards and Warriors.
Never heard of it until today.
Yeah.
All right. I'll keep that in. Dude, listen, I like I said, I own maybe, I feel like at maximum I may have owned 7 Nintendo games by the time I jumped into the Sega Genesis, which was in 1992. So it wasn't that much longer.
It was a small window.
Yeah, for me. But almost all my Nintendo experience game time was like via renting. Best Video and Manhattan Video, all on Penn Avenue in Wilkinsburg. And the Midnight Listener can correct me on this because he would know just as well as I do. But they were I would say they were probably like a block and a half away from each other. I always thought it was fascinating that they were so close. You could like walk to the next one like a minute and a half. But the nice part about, because my parents had memberships of both.
Yeah.
So, but they each had different games. Like, so the luxury was I could go to between each one, when I was allowed to rent a game and rent it for the weekend. But anyhow, I was trying to think of earlier the third game that I got for Christmas when I got my Nintendo, and I just clicked finally. Paperboy. And that is my shout out.
It's a good game.
Because when you're a kid and you have only 3 games to play, technically 4 if you count the Duck Hunt Mario bit, but you only 3 games to really play, you're going to play the shit out of those games because you have nothing else. And Paperboy, which I barely remember, I know I liked it, but I barely remember it, but I remember the potholes, I remember the dogs, but I remember, again, a game that was very addicting. Like, it would, I mean, it's Paperboy, exactly what it sounds like, ladies and gentlemen. Like, you're delivering fucking papers. I know that's actually pretty boring. But if you are the Paperboy yourself, you're dodging mailmen, I think.
Yeah.
You're dodging cars, you're dodging the potholes, dodging dogs. I think that was it. Maybe birds? But I don't think there were any birds.
One thing that always reminds me of Paperboy. Did you guys ever play Back to the Future on the NES?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, in between, like, the actual, like, story levels, you're basically just like walking up the street, very much like Paperboy, and you're dodging puddles, manhole covers, guys randomly carrying around like panes of glass, and dogs. And it really serves zero purpose whatsoever, but it's like a direct ripoff of Paperboy. And Paperboy gets a lot of accolades, for what it was for the time. It's a fun game.
It's a good time killer. Like all Nintendo games.
There's not really a purpose except for delivering papers. But it's fun.
You guys are missing the best part of Paperboy, and that is not actually delivering the papers to the mailbox. It's throwing them through people's fucking windows.
That's
that you
right.
can do, yeah.
That was the best part of that game. Was the destruction of public property.
The 8-bit glass shattering sound.
Oh, it was the best. That's what you did. You just went ahead and when we were playing the game, it was more fun to just destroy the neighborhood. than it was to actually deliver the
I
papers.
forgot about throwing it through glass. I forgot all about that. But yeah, so it was a fun game, and I will give it a shout out because it was one of the original 3 that I owned and had no choice but to play because I had nothing else to play.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
awesome.
my shout out.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a game that came out like 1984. I think it was out for like another
Yeah,
console
yeah, that was an early one.
was it on Atari first? Maybe I'm not even sure, but
Yeah, I don't recall.
but so okay then. Did you do your shout out yet? Yeah, you already did yours. Yeah. So we are going. I guess you guys are doing your top 5
Yep.
Yeah.
as you were, because I have no 5 or 4.
It's
so.
all right. Well, Jeff and I will volley a little bit, Jones. And do
You want to go through your 5, and then we'll just sort of go round robin?
you want me to do my top 5? Or do you want to do 5, then 4, and then 3, 2, 1?
Either or. Don't matter.
Well, let me go with my number 5. And ladies and gentlemen, there's only one true way to introduce number 5 in my list. That's by saying up, up, down, down, left, right, BA start. The most iconic code in the history of gaming.
Still referenced in a whole lot of pop culture shit today.
A whole lot of pop culture shit. Has appeared in a number of other games throughout the years. And for those of you that live by the code, know that it is from Contra.
I like how you looked at your notes like you forgot what game it was.
You did a little bit.
You hesitated there. Everyone knows it's fucking Contra Day.
No, I was thinking of saying something else kind of clever to it, but I decided not to at that point. I was stalling for time as I was processing in my mind on that one. Contra always reminded me of the movie Predator. Which, you weren't doing movie tie-ins to a lot of video games at this point. You mentioned Back to the Future, Batman.
Oh yeah.
Kind of famously, but a lot of video games were still really not licensing from. You didn't have those tie-ins like you do today.
That OG Batman game was pretty fucking good.
But when you look at the cover of Contra, the dude clearly is Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
And the other dude is clearly Billy from Predator. The Native American tracker. And Contra is just a game where you're 2 commandos going through the woods. You're fighting commandos, and then it slowly starts to turn into aliens.
To everybody's surprise.
To no one's surprise.
Sorry, guys.
That's all good.
But yeah. And, your weapons start as machine guns, and then as you start to progress through the game, your weapons upgrade into better weapons. And, you're basically implementing like an alien abduction or an alien invasion in the middle of the woods. Which is Predator.
Yeah.
Just without a predator.
Yeah.
So, and I love this game. And the cheat code was something you do at the beginning of the game because you died easily in this game often. And it was also fun too because you play this game 2 players at the same time, which is also something that's a lot of fun. Because there weren't a lot of Nintendo games where you could play 2 people at the same time.
Right.
Like you said,
alternating.
You're always alternating, and a lot of it's turn-based. Even Super Mario Brothers, when you die, player 2 kicks in.
That's right.
But this one you're playing simultaneously, and you're working together in tandem, which is, again, something you didn't do in a lot of Nintendo games at this point. But you oftentimes had to. But you died very easily in this game. So the up, up, down, down, left, right, BA start is going to give you 30 lives. Now, when you first start playing the game, you need all 30 lives, because you're going to die a lot. But as you get better at the game, you can then start to really fuck around in the game. Because, you maybe don't need 30 lives. Maybe you need just 10 or 15.
Only.
So then you have a lot more fun. But you can also steal lives from your other guy, too, which is another fun aspect of this game. He's got 4 lives left. You have 1. You just take one of his lives if you want to keep playing. But it was a fantastic game. A lot of fun, spawned a lot of sequels, a lot of games that are still versions of it played today. I actually think coming up, I don't know if it's been released yet or not, but they've been doing a lot of like retro gaming releases on like Nintendo Switch and stuff of collections. That's been for other systems too. We had the Ninja Turtle collection that just came out recently, the Castlevania collection, and they're going to be doing a Contra collection coming up here too, which will kind of combine the 8-bit games, the 16-bit games, Game Boy games, and such to be able to play now on the modern systems. But but it's a great game. It's one that anytime I go down to visit Mike Aniskevich in DC, there's usually 2 Nintendo games we'll play all the time. Bases Loaded and Contra. And it's got great playability. Still plays well today. Just a fantastic game.
Yeah, it's a classic platform shooter. It made shooters popular. If you really think about it. And like you mentioned, it's one of the few games, at least for the time, where you could play together, which was super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Contra was at another friend's house game because I didn't have it, but I played it quite often, and I do recall very vividly just sort of like getting towards the end of the game and it getting weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder and more like there's aliens. Now it's like it's not what you were playing before. And so I went back and watched a quick playthrough a few days ago, and I'm like, I do remember the boss, that massive heart thing, whatever the fuck that actually was. And then it's funny because that means to me that I beat the game because I remember vividly the end, the helicopter flying off. And there's a bomb going off or something.
Yeah. It's the end of Predator.
That's the end of fucking Predator.
Yeah.
I'm like, how was this the end of Predator?
Yeah.
So in my
they
mind,
snuke it at the end.
and take this any which way you want. But Contra, having now gone through and watched it again, it reaffirms it is the Mike Bay of 8-bit gaming.
It is. I'm not even...
That's fair.
It is really.
It's pretty accurate.
It's full on pure chaos. You're just shooting things for the sake of shooting things. And that's okay, because it needed to be.
And it really launched that genre of games, as you said. It's one of the first games where it's a testosterone-fueled 80s movie video game.
Yeah.
It's Rambo, it's Commando.
Yeah, it feels like an
Predator.
action flick, yeah.
It's an action flick, and the whole purpose of action flicks is, just dropping mass destruction and annihilating, aliens. So, boom, we got that, right?
Yeah.
So hopping over to me, my number 5 is a game that I love, but I also hate at the same time.
But I also hate.
And that is the one and only Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which Jones mentioned was one of his first games that he owned. I love the Ninja Turtles, and I love this game, but this is the most frustrating game I've ever played in my entire life.
Yeah.
Everything's going smooth and fine until you get to the dam, and then you gotta go in the fucking water.
Everything
and
changes.
You keep getting electrocuted, and you're drowning, and you're like, oh, I only have one turtle left, and then you don't.
They're all
like,
dead.
This is fucking terrible.
Yeah, in the game, you don't have, multiple lives and things like
No,
that.
you got four turtles. That's it.
And you can switch between your turtles as you go through the game, if I remember correctly. Yes. And, as you're playing as Leonardo, he starts to, cuck.
We all know what he does.
We do. Oh, you know what you do. You know what you're doing, Leonardo. You dirty.
You know what you did.
Dirty fucking turtle, you.
That got real weird.
You know what's going to get really much weirder? When you picture Leonardo cucking in the corner, turtles have huge dicks. Like, really big turtle dicks.
Yes, I'm aware of this, yes.
Yeah. Watch it. Goes on YouTube, everybody, when you get a chance, and check out Anatomically Correct Ninja Turtles. Somebody did it's fucking fantastic.
I did not know about this, and I'm kind of glad I didn't know.
It's in the theme of the cartoon, the animated series, like the Ninja Turtles cartoon that we grew up with. It's in that theme. Anatomically Correct Ninja Turtles. And then it's like the discipline is like, now we're going to get to the point where we talk about turtle dicks. It's phenomenal, man. You guys got to check that. I might even play that for you guys after we finish recording this. But
boy.
But yeah, so you could switch between your characters, and then this way, if Leonardo's close to dying, you can switch over to Donatello, switch to Raphael, and you.
Because there's also points too, like one of the early levels is like you're in this 2-story warehouse, and if you're using Michelangelo or Raphael, your weapons don't have the long range that you need to be able to hit the guys on the other side of the crates and the boxes. Yep. So you're constantly switching back and forth. But that fucking damn, man.
So it's funny. It is such a cool feeling to know that you can go your whole life. You can go 23 years of your life not knowing feeling that you were alone with this issue. And then you meet people like-minded people who don't look like you, didn't grow up in the same place as you, didn't have the same experiences as you, but they all had this one unifying experience, that fucking level where it's like, look, it's not the timer, it's not the electric jelly fucking fish or whatever the fuck those things are in the walls, it's not the weird electric barriers, it's all of it.
It is.
And it's on top of that, it's the weird janky controls because you're
Yeah.
floating up
Yeah.
and down and you're
you can't
constantly
really
down.
control it.
It's all, and then as a little, because you're a little kid, mind you, you're like 7 years old. You're trying to just fucking make this thing work.
Adults couldn't figure this shit out.
And the timer's going, so this anxiety's setting in.
Yeah, it's just panic.
Well, that's the other
It's
thing
just
about
sheer
it, too,
panic.
is that there's a timer going on this whole thing too. So this entire thing you're doing is timed.
Yeah, because it's all gonna explode if
Yeah.
you don't.
And it's is it the hardest level in the history of video games, guys?
I don't know.
No, it's one of the most frustrating.
For a fucking amphibian that lives in water, it sure is real hard to swim. Tell you that.
You know what? True words have not been said today. So
But I love this game.
I know for a fact I never beat that game because
Yeah, I never did.
Watching a Let's Play of it leading up to this, there are levels I never saw before, and I'm like, oh, what
You're
is
like, oh,
this?
that's what's after that.
That's
I
what
never
happens when
knew.
you do this?
Yeah.
Son of a bitch.
That's why this game didn't make my top 5 because I never got past that level.
Yeah, but like the
I don't
action
know
is
anybody who
good.
did.
Like it's cool when you're driving around the van, like going in between levels. But once you get to that point, you're like, fuck this game.
And what's interesting is that for Christmas I got the Ninja Turtle collection, and that game's on it. So
When do you plan on tackling that?
after I finish Hellblade. So
Never.
don't spit it out, Jones. Don't spit it out. Don't do it. It's coming out of his nose. No, it's not.
All right. Well, well played.
But I actually do plan on playing that very soon. Thank you, Dick. Just
Very
because
soon.
I never beat it. Just because I
Eventually.
never beat it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I mean, and since this is it in my list, so I mean, it'd be redundant for me to talk about the exact same thing, so I'll just chime in. So I think what sold me on the game, outside of the fact that my parents bought it for me, is the intro's fantastic still. It's so cool. It's so fucking cool. You know, but the best part is, though, having not beaten the game, I'm pretty confident never beat the dam before, ever. Seeing the game progress further and seeing the end, and you beat the game, and Splinter's like, all right, you've excelled all the things I want you to do. I'm going to turn into a human now. He's a fucking human. Like, yo, we could have done this at any time. Why did you choose now? You could have taught me how to be a ninja as a human. Why? What? It doesn't make any sense. And then April's like, yay, Splinter's a human now. Let's have pizza.
yeah.
End of the game. What the?
Yeah.
I'm spoiled with gaming now.
Not a big payoff
No, and that's
for
a
the
theme.
frustration that gets you
Oh
to
my
that
God.
point.
That is a theme for Nintendo games,
Yeah.
unfortunately, is that the ending's always like, well, hey, you beat the game.
Yeah.
Try again next. Oh, the best is when you beat the game and it's like, all right, you did it. So start over. Another challenge awaits. What the fuck? No, I'm good now. I just spent 3.5 hours.
Going all the way back there, it's
I'm
starting
not
over
starting
again.
over. Fuck you. No. Fuck you. I'm not starting over.
Nintendo was all about the journey, not the destination.
Not the fucking payoff. Well, you're right. So watching the playthrough, actually, there was things that like the player was doing that I'm like, how did I not think of doing this? There's a point when you fight, and this is just me, my squirrely ignorance as a child, but like when you fight Rocksteady, I think it's Rocksteady. Like you're doing your thing, you're hopping around him, and he's charging you. This motherfucker jumped on the top of the fucking boxes and just like took the staff and just kept hitting him in the head. I'm like, wait a minute.
You could do that?
You could do that shit? Well, god damn it. But the game was great for what it was, and it was great because it was Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
It was great because you got to be Raphael.
You got to experience it.
Yep.
You know, even though it was genuinely piss poor, you could. But for a first attempt, I think to this day that it's a great game.
Yeah.
It is like my number. Technically, it is like my number 3. Probably.
Yeah, I think you had that as your 3.
I think it's my third game. And it would be higher if it wasn't so goddamn frustrating. Because I can tell you the exact point where everybody screws up. There's a point in which you get to the first bomb, everything's good. You get to the second bomb, because there's 8. You get to the second bomb, okay, you get a little tricky. You gotta wait for the little beams to go by. But there's like 2 points in that level where it's just wall to wall, those electric leaves or whatever the fuck they are, wall to wall, and there's so little room for error. And being a small child and not being great at gaming, by this point you probably only have that turtle left.
Yeah.
So
if you mess it up, you're fucked.
I gotta be able to do this, and you never do. And if you somehow manage to get past that wall-to-wall section, there's one more, and you're not getting past that. So,
Yeah. But shout out to Ninja Turtles for
Ninja
setting us up to be able to deal with disappointment, frustration, and failure in life. So thank you, Konami, for that.
Fuck you, Konami.
Oh, that's true.
How dare you put us through that shit? Anyhow,
video games are why we're relatively well put together adults.
Fuck, I hope so.
You know, all the different things that we had to endure as kids playing those fucking
frustration.
games.
Oh, Mom, you turned it off. Cool, I only spent 3 hours on that. But you know what? Here's to a point, and I'll let you go to your number 4 next. But so watching these Let's Plays, all these different games, realizing that most of them can be beaten in like 40 fucking minutes.
Yeah, some of them are like,
oh my god.
Yeah,
and I'm like, how was I that bad at this that I was spending hours on some of this?
That was one of my favorite things when I did some watch throughs also, Jones, just kind of refamiliarize for games I couldn't play again that I don't have on different systems and whatnot. But I was reading the comments, and that was pretty much the comment on every person's video. It was like, how the I could get through this in 35 minutes? What the fuck?
Like almost every, with the exception of like Zelda. Yeah. And like one other game maybe, they're all like less than an hour. Yeah. And it's not like they're speed running it. No. They're just playing it.
Yeah.
And they're being smart about it.
Yep.
Not just jumping around like an asshole like we did as kids, probably. It put me in my place a little bit.
Yeah.
Dang.
Because like Ninja Turtles, like I'm pretty sure the Let's Play I watched was like 42 minutes. And I'm like, I refuse to believe that I could have done this in one sitting.
Yeah.
Oh, god damn it. Anyhow, what's your number 4, Mac?
Once we get into the Nintendo system, sports games start to really kind of take off. It starts with the Nintendo Ice Hockey, which I wanted to really put on this, but I can't put that ahead of Blades of Steel, which is another great hockey game. You've got Nintendo Baseball, which then turns into Bases Loaded. You got Tecmo Bowl. These are all fine sports games that probably everybody listening has played at some point in time. But there was one sports game that stood above them all. And that involves a family member of mine. Guys, I didn't really know that. A lot of people often refer to me as Big Mac, McDonald, right? But Little Mac. And ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mike Tyson's Punch-Out as my number 4. A classic game. Boxing, not really in the sports lexicon, but at this point in time when this game comes out, we have Mike Tyson's name attached to it. This is before a lot of shit. Because now a lot of games afterwards just refer to it as Punch-Out, not Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. It's kind of like how golf games, it was Tiger Woods, PGA Tour Golf, and now it's just PGA Tour Golf. But the purpose of this game is you are an up-and-coming boxer, Little Mac. Little Mac, man.
In a pink tracksuit.
That's right. And you are the underdog boxer. This is kind of a little bit of a Rocky type thing.
Not a little bit.
Well, there's a lot. It's a lot of it of Rocky. But you gotta climb the weight classes, and you gotta fight some of the most iconic boxing foes of all time.
Iconic with serious air quotes.
Glass Joe.
That's the easier way into it. If you can beat Glass Joe pretty easily.
Yeah. You've got the Great Tiger. You've got King Hippo. You've got the Sandman. And of course, as you're going through,
don't forget Soda Popinski.
Oh, there's a lot of nationalities
there's some things going on there.
There's a lot of representation
issues.
I think is a good way to. Again, it's the 80s, ladies and gentlemen. This podcast should just be called ... It's the 80s.
Yeah.
There weren't any rules in the 80s at this point. So Soda Popinski, amongst others, and you go all the way up until you achieve greatness by defeating Mike Tyson himself, the heavyweight champ, who is almost impossible.
Yo, he will one-shot you.
To beat in this game.
He will one-shot you
it's not.
knock you out.
It's not fair.
You really have to be good at this game if you get to that point to fight Mike Tyson.
So I will say that my experience with that game, is I played it not consistently. I didn't own it, of course, because I owned fucking nothing apparently. But I did play it quite often at families, younger cousins who had it. And the one thing that that I began to master is the art of every single character has a tell. They have like their own little thing that they do. If you just time that shit, you can beat everybody.
Yeah.
Mike Tyson, he also had his own little kind of like routine that he would do. The problem is every other character can hit you once and not destroy you. He, however, if you slipped up and got hit once,
you're out.
You were either knocked out or damn near knocked out, which was super fucking unfair, which isn't even balanced whatsoever, actually. Which, I mean, what is balance in Nintendo games, obviously? That game was great, man. I remember the fucking
that game's a lot of fun.
The little training screens where you're running and my man's riding his bike or something in front of you.
Yeah, you had
Doc was his name.
Doc was your corner man. He was your trainer, and they put montages in between loading screens and everything as you went to different levels, which is fantastic, right?
So they call me Mac, and they call me Doc, and they call you Mac. So maybe I should just coach you as a boxer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really where we have to get to, right?
I mean, it's all that's left.
That's all. This is what we're gonna do here.
But the gameplay is really relatively simple in the game. You've got basically jabs and you've got body punches. You punch with your left, you punch with your right, up down, and then all you can really do is dodge and duck and block, and that's it. It's really simple gameplay controls. But just the way the game is, you gotta basically get your opponent down 3 times to knock him out. Sometimes you got opponents where it might be a TKO. Your opponents are trash talking you in between rounds. As your character's getting his ass beat, Little Mac more and more shows he's getting his ass beat. Mm-hmm. So the game does kind of recognize if your character's taking more shots than probably should for certain characters. But again, an immensely popular game. It has spawned several sequels, not as many for Nintendo as I think should have, for what I consider to be a tentpole game for Nintendo. You had Super Punch-Out on Super Nintendo, and then a great version of Punch-Out on Wii, which was a fucking aerobics exercise if you guys ever played that
because you actually have to box.
You actually have to box
which was fun.
With the Wii controllers, with the Wiimotes in each hand. You're sitting up there. Like, my brother came to visit me one time, and he got really into playing Punch-Out for the Wii. And I would come upstairs, he'd be sweating bullets. I think my brother dropped like 10 pounds playing that game in 2 weeks. So, forget Wii Fits, just play Punch-Out.
Yeah, we got to really thank Punch-Out because it helped pave the way for so many great boxing games. First, whether they were more arcadey, like, what's it called, like Rumble or Ready to Rumble or something or other, or like on Xbox 360.
Ready to Rumble, I think that's what you're talking about.
Which was a great game, but then like my jam was like the EA boxing.
Oh, the
games.
EA boxing games are great.
There was like a period where I was super into boxing games, and I would get the new one every year, and because
as they got more and more realistic, you felt like you were in it.
Yeah, it was cool because you could make your own boxer, of course, but you could pick from like your Marcianos and your Muhammad Ali's and your Evander Holyfields, and you could really like take them and have dream fights. There was a period, and again, any of our younger listeners who don't really understand, there was like a period when we were little kids in the 80s and 90s where boxing was a very big deal. And we most of it to Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was a pay-per-view draw and a half.
Yeah, he put that shit on the map.
He genuinely legitimized boxing, which had been like kind of out of like the public view for a long time.
Yeah, because, at that point in time, Muhammad Ali wasn't... really wasn't fighting anymore.
No, he was not at all.
George Foreman retired. Yeah. Joe Frazier was done. A lot of those big tentpole boxing draws weren't there.
Here comes this kid from Catskill, man, and he is fucking crushing people.
He is the most... I will say there was not a person on this planet, bar maybe Chuck Norris, who was more dangerous than Mike Tyson for a stretch from like 1985 to like 1989.
My man.
That dude ate people alive.
He looked... When I was
in the 90s, he literally did eat somebody.
He did try to eat somebody.
He did try to eat somebody. Yeah, Vander Holyfield.
Was it 97?
Yeah, funny how that worked.
Yeah.
Mike Tyson doesn't make the episode about Mike Tyson, but Mike Tyson, I remember as a kid, like he was intimidating looking. He looked like if a shark was a human being. That's what he always reminded me of, as a fucking human shark. Like he was bloodthirsty. He would maul you, and like I remember as a little kid growing up, all my friends, like we wanted to be like Mike Tyson. You wanted to fight like Mike because he feared no man. And, sure, he had that voice he had, but that made it even more intimidating because you weren't going to call him on it because he'd murder you.
No, that dude was the greatest puncher in the history of sports.
Dude was like built like a tank, and he would destroy your face.
Yep.
Quite frankly.
Literally.
Yeah. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is a great game. Great game.
Yep.
Many games I wish I owned that I could have played more, but I think it was kind of good in a way that I didn't, because it was like it made those experiences like, oh, I'm going over here, I'm going over my cousin David, so I'm gonna play Punch-Out when I get there.
Yeah.
You look forward to those sorts of things. Jeff?
Good choice. My number 4 goes back to our debate at the top of the show about Disney theme songs, which is where this all stemmed from. My number 4 pick for the NES is Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers.
Chip, 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 chip.
And there's this debate: is it DuckTales? Is it Rescue Rangers? Is it Darkwing Duck? Whatever the case may be. For my money, theme song notwithstanding, my number 4 pick is Rescue Rangers. The game is centered around Chip and Dale trying to rescue, I think the girl's name is Mindy or Mandy.
Gadget.
Well, no, the kid's cat gets stolen.
Oh, is that what it was?
Which is a lie made up by Fat Cat.
I remember
who
Fat
then
Cat.
kidnaps Gadget. And so your goal is to rescue Gadget as you work through the game. Classic side scroller, fairly simplistic in terms of the overall mechanics and the style of the gameplay, but it's just a super fun game to just like pick up on the fly. In my bar downstairs, I think Rescue Rangers is what I have in my NES console.
Nice.
Right now,
as we speak.
Yeah.
Right downstairs right now.
So it's just a fun game, and there was a period of time where the Disney licensed games were like, that was a big jam for a lot of people. I think Rescue Rangers for the NES sold over 1 million copies.
No shit.
So a lot of people were playing that.
I think DuckTales was the first one to really kind of hit in that market.
Mm-hmm. You played as Scrooge.
Yeah, and which no offense, Jeff, to me it was DuckTales over Rescue Rangers, and for the NES for my money, but it opened the door to let these other licensed marketed games come out. We had quite a few that end up coming afterwards for Nintendo.
Yeah, and it paved the way for like Lion King and Aladdin on 16-bit systems.
Good games. Aladdin was so damn good.
And actually, Lion King was they had an NES port of the Lion King. That was the last NES game that was developed.
Yeah,
really?
Before
cool.
They just shut down all the lines. But those Disney licensed games were really fucking way better than they had any business being.
No, they were. And that's the thing that's kind of funny when you talk about this, is that when you think about these licensed games, you're thinking they're marketing this to a specific audience.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that the gameplay, and I think for Rescue Rangers, the gameplay wasn't overly complicated.
Pretty simple.
But the appeal to so many people to play these games, that, like you said, Jones, when we mentioned Aladdin and Lion King, those were just reported recently to the current gen systems that you could get as both games are on the same disc kind of a deal.
Yeah.
Just for people to go ahead and replay them, because those games were so much better than they needed to be. And you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, I never played that game, but I did go back and watch a playthrough of it, and surprisingly simple and very fast paced.
Yeah,
I did not. I guess I should expect it to be fast paced, but it was much faster gameplay. Pick up the boxes, jumping around, you throw in the boxes. And,
yeah.
I think the playthrough I watched was like 32 minutes. I was like, man, I wonder how fast Jeff beat that game.
It's short. Not in 32 minutes. I wish it was 32 minutes.
But it looked cool, and I'm with Mac on that. And it's only because I played DuckTales on Nintendo, and I really enjoyed it a lot. But the game looked great. I mean, and the fat cat was at the end, and he is a really fat cat. He's a fat pussy. So
Yeah, he lives up to the name.
yes, a nice suit.
And the 8-bit version of the Chippendale Rescue Ranger theme song is a fucking banger.
Yeah, it's really interesting how for Nintendo, I think in particular, as you know from just listening to this fucking podcast and listening to our theme music, the 8-bit music was a thing. I mean, it was Super Mario. The Super Mario Brothers work if the theme song for Super Mario Brothers isn't quite what it is. I mean, does it add to
It's
it?
hard to tell.
But like you have one opportunity to get that right, and they nail it.
Right.
And then you get to Zelda, they nail it. These themes have, I mean, they make orchestras, symphonies with this shit now, because of how iconic certain scores are, and so many of them have their root in 8-bit games. Why are 8-bit game soundtracks so fucking good?
May I make I'll throw my hat in the ring on why I think that is, and I'm spitballing here because, okay, so 8-bit music is super simple. Obviously, there are no strings involved. There's no bass really involved. There's no
It's
vocals.
just MIDI keyboards.
It's just very simple. But the beauty of that is that you can extrapolate that and make it greater. You can't make the theme song from, since we just talked about Hellblade, better effectively because it already is at its peak. You can make a metal version of it. Sure,
Yeah.
you can.
There's iterations that you can make of it.
But you can take something simple and make it more complex. I wouldn't say it's easy to do, but that's easier than taking something that's already complex and making it more complex. So I think that's why MIDI music, especially 8-bit specific gaming music, is so popular because you can take the theme song to Mario and put it just a guitar riff behind it, and that's it. You could take Legend of Zelda and just do drums and maybe a little bass and maybe a little guitar, or just do a piano. I mean, I think that's why. I really think that's why, because it's so simple that you can do anything with it. The canvas is so blank that you can add so many more colors and layers to it and textures to it.
Yeah.
And the other side of it too is just the nostalgia of it,
Right.
right? Because
Yeah,
it
for sure.
immediately
That's a
takes
fact.
it immediately takes you back to a place.
Yeah.
What place?
Childhood, man.
All right,
The
just
80s.
wondering. Fuck. Do any of us really even remember the 80s actively?
No.
Because I don't fucking remember them.
I
have images and emotions that I have, but I don't remember the 80s actively. It's weird that I don't. I feel like I should because I was born in 80 fucking 2, but I don't remember much of it.
You had about 7.5 years there.
But I remember, like, I have images, and that's it.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into number 3s.
All right. Do you want to go with number 3, Jones?
Your number 3 was Turtles.
Yeah,
we
so
already
we
talked about
All right. Yeah.
Let's move the fuck on.
My number 3, my favorite video game franchise of all time. I have such love for this game and for this series. And it is the second in the series. You know, I think they took the premise of the original and they built upon it, expanded the gameplay a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mega Man 2.
Ooh, that game was some serious shit. And I mean that in a good way. It had a lot going on for it being what it was.
You know, we take the titular character, Mega Man, who is an android, for all intents and purposes. You know, as the game and the legacy of Mega Man grew, it's kind of like a human robot hybrid kind of a thing. But, you know, you are, in this game, you are the protecting the city from the minions of Dr. Wily, who was vanquished in the first game.
Good old Dr. Wily.
Good old Dr.
He always
Wily.
comes
So
back.
wily.
He always comes back.
You know, Dr. Light is your creator. And, you know, you find yourself here in a world with 8 robot masters that you have to defeat. Not 6, but 8. And the beauty of the Mega Man games, everybody, is the rock, paper, scissors quality to them, which is one of the things that always kind of appeals to me, besides the gameplay, which is, they're fast-paced games.
Yep.
Very action-oriented. You got to use some smarts in certain places. But when you play the game, you figure out that there's an order in which you're supposed to beat the characters. And you've got 8 bosses in this game. You've got Bubble Man, you've got Wood Man, Heat Man,
Woodman.
and Air Man. He is a fucking just tree trunk with a face.
Isn't there a Cut Man or something like that?
There is Cutman's in the first one.
Yeah,
Cutman's in the first
Mega Man
one. Metal Man, Flash Man, Crash Man, and then we have Quick Man in this one. Quick Man is very close to Cutman.
Okay.
He has
a blades.
boomerang. His was a boomerang. The blade was Metal Man.
Okay.
Where you actually were throwing fucking metal, like, wood cutting blades at people. But that thing in the game, because you got your regular blaster, but you have to go for Metal Man first, because when you beat Metal Man, you get that blade and you can shoot that thing in every direction, up, down, left, right, and diagonal, which is kind of the only weapon you can really do that with in this game. So once you beat your 8 characters, the mystery portal opens in the middle and you're going into the bad guy's lair. There's like another 4 levels in the lair. Brings back the Blob in that one, famous from being the hardest fucking thing you ever had to beat in the first game. Blob's back. And that's not really the hardest even stage in this game. But it's a fantastic, 2-dimensional side scroller, very action oriented. Once you start to figure out the order in which you need to go, Metal Man's weapon beats another character faster, and then you get that one, you go to the next level, and so forth and so on. This game also introduced in the Mega Man lore the precursor to Rush, which famously shows up in Mega Man 3. But there are these different elements and upgrades that you have to get that'll take you through different parts of the game that you otherwise can't get through, or you can, but it's horribly difficult. Like in Heatman's level, you basically have to go through this thing of fire, and it's molten lava underneath, and if you fall and you hit it, you die. But the thing is, you have to jump through these flashing bricks, and if you don't get the order right in a couple points, it's really fucking hard to make the jump. You're gonna die. But when you beat a certain character in a certain order, you get a jet thing that you can go ahead and hit, and it'll take you across the whole thing without having to worry about jumping over the bricks. And just gets you past the point even faster. So,
and for those that don't know, Rush is Mega Man's Mega Dog.
He is his Mega Dog, right?
Yes.
Trusty sidekick for the future of the series as they started introducing different characters. Great action, fantastic music. Mega Man games always have great music.
Yes.
So good, in fact, that when we go to different video game shows, Replay Effects, they were always there. I think they were at the one that we paneled at, Bit Brigade.
The lost episode no one will ever hear, because it does not exist anymore.
It'll pop up at some point.
No, it never will. It's gone.
Yeah.
But,
Technical difficulties that day.
Oh, did we really lose the whole thing?
Yes.
I knew we lost part of it. I thought there's still
it wasn't
enough
recording
salvageable.
after a while. Like, it stopped recording.
Son of a bitch. Well,
It's
shame
gone.
on you for not being there.
Yeah. Next year.
Yeah.
This year.
Where the fuck were you, India, when we needed you most? You weren't at the game. You weren't at the gaming con. That's for damn sure.
No, you weren't.
But next year,
This year.
This year. That's
October.
right. Next time, book your travel plans, ladies and gentlemen. If
Come to fucking Pittsburgh.
see if they'll, maybe they'll bring us back. We don't know. We haven't had those.
We hope so.
We haven't had. There are a lot of people that were working in that convention that came to listen to us talk. So there's some cred there, I feel.
Yeah.
But fantastic game.
Yeah, I think the Mega Man franchise in general is just a great franchise. The replay value of it all, and I mean, look at how many iterations there are of Mega Man all these years later.
And then I think there were 7 versions of Mega Man that came out for Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went to Mega Man X. We got the Super Nintendo, and then there were 5 or 6 versions of that. And then you have, for the various different systems that have come since then, you had the original creator leaving the franchise, and they created Mighty Number 9, which is a blatant Mega Man ripoff.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Mighty Number 9 because I followed its development from the very beginning.
You turned me on to that,
and
when
I
it
was
first
so
came out.
excited because it
Giggity,
was like,
thank you.
And I
what you did there.
don't remember if it wasn't a Kickstarter. I think it was a Kickstarter deal, and I followed it, and I was so excited because, growing up being a Mega Man fan, I didn't play a ton of Mega Man games because I played Sega and so on and so forth. So I played Mega Man 2 and 3. Those are the only ones I ever played.
Probably the 2 that you should have played.
Yeah,
That's fair.
2 of the best.
Yeah.
And I was so excited for Mighty Number 9 to come out, and it was not good.
It was not good.
And it's such a bummer because it looked so good.
It looked like everything
so
you
promising.
wanted it to be.
Yeah. So I'm always going to be salty about that. But I'm going to, so Mega Man 2, I didn't play Mega Man 1, but my little shout out to, and I want to bring this up at this episode. I'm glad it's a good opportunity to. So, when you're young and you go to the video game store, Toys R Us, the rental place, and you're looking at the different games, there's one thing that I think we can all agree upon. That the artists for the boxes and the cartridges went way too fucking hard for these games.
Yeah.
Mega Man 1 is like just some dude in a suit.
Yeah, it looks like Tron.
It's Tron.
And I'm pretty sure there's like some woman with him. I think.
Yeah.
And almost all the games look like that.
Yeah. Then you go to play Mega Man, and it's really just a kid in a robot suit.
And it's some little fucking child basically in a robot suit. But it was like Liam Neeson in a full on blue armor suit on the package. But like OG first and second generation Nintendo games, they all looked like that. They all had very realistic artwork because that's how they viewed it.
But it was like that simple like gray box.
Yeah.
And then like the artwork that was like illustrated like graphic novel type artwork in the center of the package.
Wizards and Warriors and its iterations had like fucking Conan the Barbarian, but I think it was Fabio.
It was fucking Fabio. I bet it was Fabio.
Like in a loincloth.
I don't know how to respond to
that.
Thank you, Siri, on my watch.
Hey.
But she doesn't, because nobody did. When you watch it, when you play the game in Wizards and Warriors, you're just in regular armor the whole time.
It doesn't make any damn sense.
No sense whatsoever.
Like but I love that was like the marching orders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it like make it look real, make it look serious.
And they all did.
And then you played it, and you couldn't even tell where the dude's eyes were.
Yeah.
It was like, well, here we are. But I just wanted to have a shout out for the artwork, the people who did the illustrations. But to the point of the game, Mega Man 2 was a great game. I played it quite often. It was a rental, and definitely never beat that game. But it was definitely a game that I sunk a lot of time into. Because I remember it was so cool getting upgrades and really
and trying to figure out the order of it.
And I don't remember, and having never played the first one, I don't know, did the first one have that upgrade system?
Yeah,
it did.
Okay.
Yeah. Every time, and that's one of the cool things about Mega Man 2, if you've never played the games, and there might be 3 of you out there who didn't, when you beat the bad guy, you get their weapon.
Yes.
And you get to carry that with you through the rest of the game. And that's part of the fun of playing the game. And where you're talking about certain games like with the Blob game, where you had to kind of hit pause and you had to go through, and it was a pain in the ass trying to cycle through the different jelly beans. This wasn't very difficult to pause the game and then switch through to find the different weapon you wanted to use as you kind of went into the game. But again, that whole rock, paper, scissors element to it, and you would use your abilities in different areas strategically throughout the game, points where you really needed to.
Good choice. Flopping over to me. So my number 3.
Flippity floppity floop.
Yeah, it happened.
Just flopping it right on the table. We're talking about Nintendo, so we would be remiss if we didn't bring Mario into the mix. So my number 3 game is also the number 3 Mario game, Super Mario Brothers 3, made ever so famous by Fred Savage. If you played the first Mario game, it's fairly straightforward. The second game, they enhanced the graphics, made it a little more cartoony, and then Super Mario 3 was sort of a game changer for them. They made each of the levels was a map. Mm-hmm. You had to work through the map. They upgraded all the power-ups. When you went into the levels and started playing them, it was the classic like Super Mario Brothers 1 sort of side-scroller that you knew and you loved, just amped up from a graphic standpoint. And they just did everything right in this game to sort of put Mario on the map. And it's interesting if you think about Nintendo as a whole to like put your flag in the pocket of one character, and like how do you decide what that's going to be? And you're like, let's make it a plumber. Like,
And a
okay.
boxing referee. Let's not forget that Mario was refereeing those
yeah.
those boxing
he
matches.
was the ref in Punch
He
Out.
had a side hustle
Yeah,
before side hustle was a thing.
to see how that evolved from the original Mario Brothers to Super Mario Brothers, which was the launch title that came with the NES for most people who got the deluxe system, and then to see how it evolved up to Mario 3, and then if you look at Mario now, all the 3D iterations and Smash Brothers and the new movie that's coming out.
You got a fucking new movie coming out.
The 3D movie, not the shitty real life movie that came out.
Which also came out.
Super Mario Brothers 3, man, all day. Raccoon Mario all day.
It could be. I mean, I would argue that it's possibly like the perfect Nintendo game. For like, and it's one of the games I owned because it was so damn good. And I'm pretty sure I didn't buy it. I'm pretty sure I didn't rent it. I'm pretty sure I just fucking took it. No, I think it was like a trade. It was like a trade. I traded somebody with it. Back when you traded games with people, like that was a thing you really did. You don't do that shit. Mainly because it's all digital, but
your parents are all pissed that you did that.
you don't tell them. You don't tell them shit. But at Mario 3, I remember playing it. I don't remember the first time I played, but I remember playing it going, this is so good. Like, this is so much better. Because I rented Mario 2, but I own Mario 1. So I played the shit out of Mario 1. Played a little bit of Mario 2, but to go from Mario 1 effectively to 3 was such a
big upgrade.
Change. Oh my god. The music, how bright and vibrant it is. The raccoon tail, which makes no damn sense, but we go with it because
it works.
It's
Mario's
the birth
world.
of furries, man. Raccoon ears and a tail.
Could be.
It makes no actual sense, but
Makes
you
more
spin
sense
my little
than
raccoon tail. I can destroy
it's more
things.
sense than the Tanuki suit,
I suppose
which
you're
turns you
correct.
into stone.
You're correct. It's still Mario exists in such a strange little universe
It does.
where things don't line up, but we just go with it because he's a plumber and we can do it. But
Yeah, and they're pipes, which is the only connection to him being a plumber.
it's the only one.
That's it.
And his suspenders, which isn't really in that much of a connection.
No.
But for my money, it is easily my favorite Nintendo Mario game ever. Period. Small question. I feel like you and I have talked about this, and I'm pretty sure you've watched it. Jeff, you ever seen Impossible Mario?
I don't think so.
Mac, did I ever show you Impossible Mario?
Oh, I know all about Impossible Mario.
Yo, it is.
Yeah.
It is without hyperbole aside. It is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. It is the first, I think, viral video I ever watched. That's how old this is.
This was a video. So this was before Mario Maker. I actually think Impossible Mario is why there's Mario Maker now.
Maybe.
I really believe there's a connection to that because of how that video blew up.
Yo, so this is to you, Jeff, and to the audience. If you've never witnessed or watched the Impossible Mario video, please do yourself this. You will be so, and knowing you, Jeff, you'll be like, this isn't fucking funny, but
This sucks more than
is
Panic
stupid.
at the Disco.
It's just this dude. I don't know if he's playing like a PC version of Mario, but it was like modded hard.
Oh, he modded it so hard.
And it's super modded, and it's super impossible. And it's just his commentary of him trying to play this thing. I remember coming across it somehow magically forever ago, and I was in tears. He's like some New York guy, like that accent. He's just flustered and just angry and agitated. How awful and unfair this game is. And it is worth your time. Audience, it is worth your time to watch Impossible Mario. It's on YouTube. I watched it recently because I was thinking about it. Like, can I find Impossible Mario? It's like 13 years old or something on YouTube. But it's fucking worth your time.
Nice.
Impossible Mario. Shout out to whoever the fuck you were who made that video. Anyhow. Yeah, Mario 3 is an excellent game. I love it. It's a really good choice.
Same.
There's so many good choices you could have made, but it's worth being on the list.
Mario 3 is my number 2. So obviously we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about that at that point because we're going to start getting to the point where we got a couple overlaps here at this stage of the episode. Now, guys, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Isn't Mario 3 really the first direct sequel to Mario? Because wasn't Super Mario 2 kind of not really a Mario game when they made it, but they kind of put Mario into the game and made it Super Mario Brothers 2? I distinctly remember, because of how different Super Mario Brothers 2 is from the rest of the franchise, that was supposed to be a different type of game, and they decided to put Mario into it and then made it a Mario game. Have you guys heard of that at all?
I've never heard that. I feel like
I
Jeff
could see
would be
that. Yeah.
Because that was always the thing with me about Super Mario 3 is that I think it was, if I'm remembering all this correctly, and I probably should have did a little bit more reading about this before I brought it up, but fuck, here we are.
There we are.
But
That's because nobody talks about Super Mario Brothers 2.
right when there's
There's a reason why it was a rental and not something I actually
or
traded
maybe that
for.
could have, or maybe that was Legend of Zelda 2 Link, because again, like how different it is from
Now
every
you're just
other
switching
version.
franchises.
But it was one of those
It's also
two.
a game that's not good.
I know, but it was one of those two. I think it was Mario Brothers. But yeah, that's why it's so different. That's why like the bad guy at the end of Super Mario Brothers 2 was like
Not
was
Bowser.
Yeah, it's like King Toad or something like that, or I don't even fucking remember. But that's my point. So this is kind of the first direct sequel we have to Super Mario. And when you look at like when you compare 1 to 3, I mean it's leaps and bounds ahead.
Oh, they level up hard.
They leveled up real hard. And again, the one thing about Super Mario Brothers 3, and last thing I'll say about it here, that really applies today, is those levels when you're in like the desert side of things, and there's that fucking angry sun that's just dive bombing you the entire time you're going through the level.
Yo, I wrote. I forgot about the angry ass son trying to murder you.
Yeah,
I'm like, holy, what is that?
I always throw
It's a
out.
video game
there are
version
fucking
of
stars being thrown at
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
it's a video game version of skin cancer.
Yeah.
What the hell?
But that like one of my favorite like things that'll throw on social media when it's a really hot fucking day. It's like, do you remember that level in Super Mario Brothers when the Super Mario Brothers 3 when the sun tried to kill you? That's today, right? But that was like the first time that you had that like little thing, and that's always one of the things I always remember about that game is just the sun
weird
when you got
decision.
there. But it works.
Did it
A
work?
lot of stuff about
They were
Mario are
throwing the
weird
fucking sun at
decisions.
You're still talking about it.
I mean, because it's silly.
You made a note about it,
Because it's silly.
but it's
'Cause I saw it when I forgot about this. Why is there a sun being thrown at me?
yeah.
And who's throwing
Why
it?
is it so angry?
Why is the sun throwing itself at me?
And I also like how at the end of each level, because before you got the flagpole and that was it, but then in this one you can get little power ups, because you have the different like the casino like thing changing to see what kind of elements you would get to it.
Yeah.
Extra little power ups and stuff. But it grew the franchise, grew the game. I think it really set Mario on the trajectory that we get today. I don't think the other Mario games happen if Super Mario 3 doesn't happen.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And Fred Savage.
The game was so fucking big that they made a movie out of it. Like
Yep.
Nintendo basically like, we're gonna make a 2-hour long commercial
Yeah.
with
It's
one
basically
of the biggest child actors of the time.
Yeah. Here's the commercial. Here's how to get the warp whistle. Here's how to get from World 1 to World 8 in 10 minutes.
Yeah. And here's a power glove.
Yes.
Fucking power glove, baby. So am I up?
You are, sir.
Sure.
Okay. So the deal is, these next, the Uncanny X-Men. It's on my list not because it's good, because of the journey I had to get to it.
Okay.
So, and I know we don't spend a lot of time with this stuff, but I'm gonna just set the context here. Again, didn't own many games. Parents were not buying me games. That shit was not a thing. Unless I could trade with somebody, it was like I had what I had, and I would rent. And I tried to push the rent every weekend. It didn't always work out that way. But typically every weekend, my dad and I would go to the video store, and he'd rent a movie or two, and I'd always try to get Monster Squad, something with Inhumanoids, the cartoon Inhumanoids, and again a game for the weekend. That was always the plan. But there was a game, because at Best Video, it was only at Best Video. They'd have like their case with all their Nintendo games in it, and they'd have the boxes, but not the game. They just have the boxes, and they'd get the games behind the desk
Yep.
and everything. And they always had an Uncanny X-Men game. It was always out. Every single time I was there. Now, we're talking 87, 88. I'm reading more, and I'm like getting into my comics more. I'm not just scribbling in my comics so I did when I was like 4 years old. I'm actually reading them now, and I'm picking up on things. I'm really getting into it now, and I'm so ingrained into the X-Men at this point. This is before the cartoon on Fox. This is just like I loved the comic books, and I was so into the idea of the mutants. So the idea that there was a video game based on my favorite thing was I couldn't wait to get my hands on it. So for months and months and I'm talking months, we'd go, and it was always empty. every single fucking time. And every time I just stare, I'll get Double Dragon, I guess. I'll get Fester's Quest. And I remember, shout out to Fester's Quest. Yeah,
I
I'll get
bet.
Fester's Quest.
I own
That
that.
was Stephanie's favorite Nintendo game. She wanted to make sure that I mentioned Fester's Quest.
Shout out to Stephanie. You're welcome, by the way, my dear. So there were, and then finally, I couldn't tell you if it was 3 months or 8 months, because when your child time moves in a weird way.
Yeah.
But it was months. I remember it being months. It was there, and I was so I was elated. I wasn't just excited. I was fucking elated to go. That one right there. That's the one I want right there. The X-Men. Yeah, the one that says Uncanny X-Men right there, right there, right there. Yeah, that's what I want. Take it before somebody else takes it. And the drive home's like 8 minutes, maybe. It is the first thing I did. I sat my ass down. I had this little stool thing. I sat down in front of my little shitty TV to play my Nintendo games. I sat my little ass down on this desk, this little stool, popped that fucker in. Didn't work. But I knew what to do. You blow into it, shake it a few times, whatever you gotta do. You know how that works.
8-bit foreplay.
And then it turns on. And I was ready for this experience.
And I'm sure you were too.
I was so ready to play an X-Men. Is the first X-Men video game.
It was the first one.
Yes.
Noah's going to take this episode and he's going to put sexy saxophone over as Jones talks about how he blew into it and how it turned on and how excited he got afterwards when it was turned on.
So you can choose your character. You can choose from Cyclops, Iceman, Colossus, Storm, Wolverine,
Nightcrawler.
And I swear to God, I chose Wolverine because of course I did. You load into the game, and I'm like, yeah, bitch, I'm gonna fuck this up. I wasn't saying that, but I was thinking it, and I just died instantly. I'm like, wait, okay, hold on, all right, I'll get that, and I proceeded to have one of the worst gaming experiences of my young life because that game was terrible. It was genuinely a bad game. And it was like there were no redeeming qualities to this experience.
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about a character whose entire idea is that he's unkillable and he has adamantium claws that are effectively the hardest metal known to man. And like, I melee things. I don't have optic blasts. I don't shoot lightning bolts. I can't teleport through things. I hit things with my fists and my claws. And if you get close enough to something to hit it, it kill you. What? Who signed off on this? Right? So I had that game rented multiple times because I refused to give up on it. And I beat the game. I'd say 33 years later, ballpark, I was watching a YouTube video for a fucking podcast where I wanted to go and refresh myself on this fucking game. Now, mind you, I'm skipping the part where I hated myself the whole time I'm playing it, right? I'm hating myself. That's the first time I became a jaded gamer, was this game. Like, I became that person.
Special place in your heart.
The lasting legacy of the Uncanny X-Men.
Yeah. So, I'm watching a YouTube video on it recently, 33 years later. Trying to figure out, like, I remember, but I don't remember a lot of it. And I'm like, oh, now I remember this. I remember how fucking awful this was. And then I watched the guy beat the fucking game, and then I found out that wasn't the end of the fucking game. Because you have to put a stupid-ass code in. Yep. Which, who the fuck knew that? Now, I didn't know that. There was nothing on the back of the box. There's nothing in the manual that says, hey, there's a code you're supposed to put in. I'm like, wait, there's more? And not that I missed much. But the point was, what kind of poor design decision do you make?
Yeah.
To have a game that you can beat, and then you're not really done, but we're not going to tell you that you can fight Magneto, the biggest fucking villain the X-Men have. You're going to fight Emma Frost instead. But then there's an actual fucking stupid... Anyhow, my point is... it's
DLC
on my list.
Before it was cool.
That's a way to put it, Jeff. It's on my list because... it has a special place in my heart for it. It introduced me to being a bitter gamer.
It taught Jones mirth at a young age.
It taught me anger. It taught me how to hate something a little bit.
Well, it's funny because, like, when we were going back and reviewing our lists, I was like, I think I remember playing that game.
It ain't good.
And I was like, I played the X-Men arcade game, which I love. It's probably
fantastic.
it's probably similar to
It's
that.
not the
And then I
slightest
went back
bit.
and I was like, oh, this is bad. But it's X-Men, but it's so bad.
It's so damn bad.
Like-
shame on them for making that game.
Like when they made the Ninja Turtles 2 game for Nintendo, they made it like the arcade game.
Yeah.
You know? And you would think that this would be the case. I never played this game as a kid because I don't think anybody liked the game enough to even recommend it to people. Like, you didn't even recommend it to people you didn't like. Like, you know what game you should really play?
You should play that X-Men game.
Play the X-Men game. You're
And
going
then
to love it.
You'd fucking beat the level. You have to go back down.
Yep.
Hold out hope for the Wolverine game, Jones. It'll bring him. It'll fix this. It'll fix.
Listen,
these
I bought a
things for
PS5
you.
just for that. But more importantly, to your point, shout out to the Wolverine Nintendo game, which was way better than this one. Way better. Didn't own it. I actually borrowed that game, and it was way better. And it should be on the list, but you know what? No. Because part of being a gamer is suffering.
Yeah.
It's true.
You got to go through the bad to get to the good sometimes.
So that's why this
And-
game is on that list.
And there's story behind it. It's not just like, yeah, I played it and
I
it was
just
shit.
remember there's very when you're an adult.
You yearned for it
Yeah.
for so long.
Yeah. When you're an adult, you don't like get excited for things like that the way you did when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And I just remember every week we go up, it's like Friday or Saturday, and it's just the box is just there. And it's just no, the game's not there. And I'm like,
You're like,
Wanted
this
to-
game must be so good.
that's what
it's just
the
gone
thing
every
is,
time.
That's what you think. Because if you're there like 3 months in a row, week after week after week, and it's not that, it's obviously so good that people are just keeping it.
No, people are renting it, playing it for an hour on the first day, and then just like setting it aside until they got to return their movie 2 days later, and then taking it back. They aren't actually playing it all that
Dude, I
time.
remember like my heart rate rose significantly when I saw that it was there and I could rent it. I'm like, we're doing this now. Where's the wallet? Give me. You know, so that's my number 2. Fucking Uncanny X-Men.
Uncanny X-Men.
It'll always stay
It's
with me.
on the list for reasons.
Not good ones.
Mac, you said your number 2 was Mario 3, which we
Yes.
talked about.
Yep.
My number 2 is also a game we talked about a little earlier. Ghosts and Goblins.
Fucking
Goblins and ghouls.
Goblins and Ghouls.
the worst game in the history of the planet
Because it's so damn difficult.
because it's so fucking hard.
Yes.
It is extremely difficult. You play the role of a knight who is about to make sweet love to his princess.
You're literally cucking these people right now.
You're wearing nothing but a loincloth. You're like having a picnic. Like
yeah.
it's about to
just
go
having
down.
a good day.
Talk about something I never even thought about until you mentioned it. Like, I never thought that those characters were... Because you don't think about that when you're 7.
No.
And then when you start playing it
Well,
again
you're
as an
40,
adult...
you do.
No, but like when I played it again as an adult, same kind of thing. It's stopped because I'm just sitting there thinking the same thing. It's like, oh, you know, you're starting off as basic as you can start off. I didn't realize they're gonna fuck.
No, my
now
man,
I know they're gonna fuck.
He was about to get into them goods.
He was about to until a big ass demon had other plans.
But I mean,
Stole
listen,
his girl.
put yourself in his position, right? The cash and prizes are about to be out. You're already shirtless. You ain't got no pants on. All
No.
you have
You
is
don't
like
have to take the loincloth
you
off.
gotta-
You can just fuck with the loincloth
you got
on.
a strip covering the.
That
your
might not even be a
goods.
loincloth. That just might be bush. Like straight bush. It's 8-bit bush is what
Oh
you said.
man, you're right.
I don't think anybody has ever said the sentence. I think that's 8-bit bush.
Coming soon to the Nothing Good shop.
8-bit
8-bit foreplay and
8-bit
8-bit bush.
Yeah. So his girl
oh,
gets
God.
stolen, and he puts his armor on, and he has to avenge that shit to get some tail.
So let's pretend you're him, right? And you're basically butt naked. It's the middle of the fucking night, whatever, not judging. And you're sitting having a picnic. There's like bread
Yeah.
and meat, maybe some grapes.
And skeletons.
She's
and shit.
fully dressed. So your ass is being very presumptuous about where things are gonna go. And you're like, he's like chilling, like,
Yeah, he's not just like casually
He's a
standing there.
spread
He's
eagle.
like, yeah.
and then a fucking demon. What do? When you're butt naked, basically, and the moonlight is shining, and you're trying to make a move here, and a demon from the depths of Hades erupts from the sky, snatches Stephanie up, and flies away to a fucking castle, and you're like, well, guess I'm going home. Like, what do you do? Do you put on your armor and go, well, I'm going to wage war against the darkness?
So I envision the story going a little bit more like this, right? So, you're sitting there, you're laying there, you're down to your loincloth because you know it's going to happen. And this is the first maiden.
Down to your loincloth.
This is the first maiden in your life. He's about to lose his virginity. And he's been waiting for a long time. This isn't the first maiden.
That makes it even worse.
Why do you think he would go ahead and pick up his lance and go try to find and fucking kill this demon?
She was down.
Because I envision this guy, this squire, maybe, if you will, maybe this serf, but he's tried to deflower maidens. This isn't the first maiden he's tried to deflower, but this is the one he's gotten furthest with, and that's about to fucking happen.
He got so far, she was still dressed.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
But he was not.
He was so fucking ready, and then, the fucking demon comes and takes her. He's so pissed. Like, God damn it, that's it! He picks up his lance and goes into battle. Like, that's the point of, like, sexual frustration he's at.
That's beyond, like, peeling the label off a bottle of beer. That is something else entirely.
It's funny because, like, as a kid, you're like, oh, it's like Bowser taking Princess Peach.
Nah, man,
Right?
It isn't.
then you're like, oh, wait, my man's naked. Yeah, there's something more going on there.
Yeah, 8-bit Bush.
Yeah, but it's a classic like side scroller adventure game. You're battling all these demons along the way to try to get the princess back. It's a fun ass game from start to finish, and it's extremely difficult.
It's not fun.
It's extremely frustrating. Not as frustrating as TMNT, but still pretty frustrating. And I remember, like, as a kid, like, only because, like, when you get to the end of each level, then it, like, zooms out and it shows you the whole
fucking map
of, like, cool. Here's the 10 levels or whatever it is. And then you're like, holy shit, still got a long way to go. And you're like, I think I got this. And then, like, you get to the next level where there's, like, multiple layers and stuff. And you're like, man, this game's fucking hard. And it's a recurring theme with Nintendo outside of, like, the Nintendo licensed games. They make it way more difficult than it should be for fucking kids games.
Let me tell you my experience with playing Ghosts and Goblins. All right. Now there is a thing, as Jeff describes the map. There is a tone. There's a little ditty that gets played. Da 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 da. And then the level starts. And then as I'm playing the game, all of a sudden I'm right back to da 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 da, because I fucking died. I fucking died immediately, if not sooner. Impossible Mario was me playing Ghosts and Goblins.
Well, it's deceiving because, like, the first level with, like, the zombies coming up out of the ground, it's like, it's pretty simple. And then there's the guys, like the flying guys, and once you figure out, the timing of the jumps and throwing your spear, it's not that difficult. But then you get to the second level and they're like, psych, gotcha, bitch.
And that was my whole thing, is that I heard that fucking thing, da 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 da, because I died so many times that I got to the point, I never threw my video game controller. I never did. I know a lot of people who did. But I got to the point where I just said casually, quietly, as a kid, as a tiny Dave, as a little Mac, as a wee tot, fuck this game.
Sometimes you gotta go, I'm done.
Yeah.
I think I need to walk away.
Yeah.
I walked away from that game so many times.
So if you have a Nintendo Switch and you have Nintendo Switch Online and have access to the Nintendo Classic Collection, it is on there. You're probably not going to beat it, but you can go play it.
So so having never played it, so I watched a pretty brisk playthrough, and the one thing that I could take away from it, outside of the obvious, my man was about to get in the good goods, was that I really appreciate the enemy design. It was pretty varied,
Yeah.
which I thought was really cool, which I did not expect. It was, like, every time I'd watch for a little bit, I'd get up, do something, come sit back down. I'm at a new level, and I'm like, man, this enemies are just
Every level
varied,
felt
actually.
different. Yeah.
That's really cool, and it was very well designed. It's a very well designed game.
I wouldn't know. I never got past level 2, because fuck that game.
Well, that's unfortunate, but very true. Because was that the hardest game you ever played for Nintendo?
I think it's still the hardest game I've ever played now. I'm serious. When Nintendo did the NES Classic release, I was at Toys R Us, so I was able to get one. The controller doesn't play the same as regular Nintendo does, so you kind of have like a little lag. You kind of have to like figure out when you're playing those games. Ghosts and Goblins is on there. Made fucking the hardest game I've ever played even harder. Because
if your timing's off, like you're
oh my god,
fucked,
you're totally fucked.
Yeah. And
I got to the same place as like a 36-year-old man where again, fuck this game.
Well, I would say the hardest Nintendo game I've ever played. You say, oh, it's Ninja Turtles. I don't think that it's because it was a really difficult game. It was poor level design was the issue, honestly. Poor level design. Ninja Gaiden was the hardest game I've ever played in my life.
Yeah. I feel that.
I never came close to beating that game. Not even kind of. It was beyond me. It was for kids older than me. It was too fast, too many things happening. I was not ready for Ninja Gaiden. That is definitely in like the short list of hardest games I've ever played, and it's the hardest Nintendo game I've ever attempted to play, which is unfortunate because it was an awesome game.
Yep.
So, that's a game that you hate. Why don't you tell us about a game that you love? What's your number one game?
We're right there,
we'll let
Jones.
you go first because me and Dave, our number one game is the same.
Yeah, we got the same one. Shocker.
That works out well for me.
Shocker.
So, Spy vs. Spy, we'll get right to it. It's funny because, like, of all the great games that Nintendo has come up with, why in the fuck is Spy vs. Spy my favorite Nintendo game? And it's not because it's a bad game. It's not great, to be fair. It's not. But it's funny, like, it's one of those fond memory games. That's probably the best way to put it. Because it's the first game that I actively remembered being competitive with. Because it was... I feel... I could be wrong, but I think it could be the first competitive Nintendo game. And when I say competitive, it wasn't competitive, but like you competed against another player.
Each other.
Like if you think about what it was doing, it was actually pretty impressive, right? So for those of you, none of you have played this fucking game. I can almost promise you that. Maybe three of you might have.
I just remember the Spy versus Spy like little cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you mention this, I was like, wait, is this the same thing? And it is.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mad Magazine. Yep. So what was so cool about this though, because it was all about subterfuge and tricking your opponent, and you could play the computer. Like you didn't, it was the first game that I played with my sister that was like we were at odds with each other, and that's so cool because it created that antagonizing relationship that we had to this very day. So how it worked is, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Spy vs. Spy, it was based on a comic strip in Mad Magazine. Where like these two spies, the white spy and the black spy, and by white and black I mean one wore white and one wore black. They are always at odds against each other, trying to get a briefcase or government secrets. And so like from what I understand, like Spy vs. Spy was kind of based on like communism in the Western world, which is that's a deeper conversation that we're gonna have here today.
It's Cold War.
But interestingly enough, like it became such a popular strip for Mad, and I remember when I was young, I got Mad Magazine and Cracked Magazine well earlier than I should have. Jokes and parodies, I had no idea what the fuck I was even looking at.
Explains a few things about you, Jones.
It should. Look, as a child, I was exposed to things I should not have been exposed to. That's for sure. I had a lot of older cousins who did not give a flying shit. But I knew of Spy vs. Spy, and I'm pretty sure I got Spy vs. Spy from the hell's it called, a flea market or something, super cheap. For my dad got it for me super cheap. So the game basically is you exist in like this little map, and you share space with another player or a computer, and your job is to find a briefcase and like 4 items, and every little map is interconnected with various rooms, and your job is to go through each room, search behind the painting, search behind the piano, search behind the closet, and try to find these different items. If you get all the briefcase and all 4 items, you get the hell out of Dodge. But the rub here is that you also have bombs, you have water traps and booby traps that you can set in different locations that the other player, because you're sharing this space, which is really cool. This is a Nintendo game.
Yeah.
You're sharing this space with another player. They're going behind you or in front of you, and sometimes you can run into each other and they can try to stab each other to death, which is always awkward. But the idea is you want to avoid the other player, set some booby traps, find the documents, the pieces that you need to find, while also avoiding their traps, and then get out of the building, get to the plane, get out of Dodge. I spent many hours over the course of however many years playing Spy versus Spy poorly, because I was very young to understand what I was really trying to do, to be honest. And it took my sister and I a while to wrap our heads around it, because it's a little deeper than like what like a 7-year-old's really going to play initially. But once you start getting like what you're trying to do, it opens up a little more. But it was cool because it's a competitive game. It's a player versus player game. Like, that's the first player versus player game I think I ever played.
Yeah, and if you look at that, all the games that were out at that time, the only other competitive games where you're playing against the other person you're playing with was sports games.
Exactly.
And this was sort of like a mind game, if you will, in terms of I'm trying to set up all these traps to sort of preemptively strike you, and outthink you and try to outsmart you. And the psychology of it plays right into the whole point of Spy versus Spy from a comic standpoint. Mm-hmm. And for as simple as 8-bit graphics were, it was a fairly complex game.
A lot was, again, like, if you think about what the game was doing, because every level, the map was a little bigger and more rooms and more turns, and you could get easily turned around trying to get out of the building. And the worst is when you turn a corner, you go into another room, and then your opponent's in the other room, and you look at each other, and you start stabbing at each other. Who stabs first is going to win, basically. But then, because it was a split screen.
It's a great message to teach kids.
Yeah, it's Spy versus Spy. The 80s, Dave. So like, the nice part about it too is like, because it was a split screen game on top of all of this. Like, the Nintendo was doing a lot of things. You could cheat if you really wanted to, but the problem is you almost couldn't, because you're so worried about finding what you're looking for. You don't have time to look at their screen.
Yeah.
They don't have time to look at your screen, because while they're looking,
by the time you do that, it's too late.
You could have already found the briefcase and the mirror and the this and the that, and you're already on your way to Maui, because it's like you had to go to you're on your way to some fucking island or something. But Spy versus Spy, I think it came in '86. That's always when I'm talking, but that's cool, Clover. Thanks, Clover. I appreciate you too. It is my favorite Nintendo game of all time because I have such good memories from it, obviously, but two, I respect it because it was actually a pretty ambitious game.
Yeah, it's so different. Yeah. I mean, if you look at even all the games on our list, which are some of the greatest NES games of all time, like, it's so different.
I can't tell you another Nintendo game that was doing that.
How many other games can you think of that have done that at all? As you kind of talk about, you're too busy looking at your screen to pay attention to what they're doing on their screen. You say that, and I immediately think of GoldenEye. Mm-hmm. Like, when you're playing multiplayer, and if you're playing, like, Man with a Golden Gun, proximity mines and everything, you're not paying attention where people are, like, throwing mines, and then you're walking in a room, and then boom, you fucking die, right? I mean, that was 10 years, 12 years after this. And I'm not saying that there really be any kind of correlation from A to B, but when you start kind of lining it up, I mean, there's similar aspects to it.
You imagine you're sitting there, you're playing the game, and you're like, you've got the briefcase, you got like the 3 items, you need one more, and you're like, you're quickly trying to get out as quickly as, and you finally find the 4th one, or you find the 3rd one, you try to find the 4th one, you're going from room to room to room to room to room, you're like, where the fuck is it, and you're trying, because you have to do it quickly, and then you're like, it has to be right here, you move that painting over, and it blows up, because your fucking sister was already in that room, and she just cackles at you, and you're like, mother... And she's already on her way out. She was waiting. She knew.
Yeah, she can't do that to you in real life.
Can't she?
She may have wanted to.
I guarantee she wanted to.
But, she also had to live there. And your parents probably wouldn't have been very happy about that.
Yeah, it's probably frowned upon.
But,
So
you're
doing video game form.
I maintain Spy vs. Spy is a very underrated game that I think a lot of big Nintendo enthusiasts completely ignore because it's not, it's not Metroid or whatever. But I think Spy vs. Spy was pretty awesome for what it was. And that's why it's my number 1.
It's a great choice.
Nice.
Thank you.
Mac?
We got one more to talk about.
Just the one.
Oh, boy.
You want to do it at the same time? Want to say it at the same time?
Let's get weird.
Want to get a little weird?
I don't know what you're going to say.
You close that microphone there? Go. 3, 2, 1. Home Alone. You fucker, you're supposed to say something. Oh, God
Nope.
damn it.
I knew you were gonna say something stupid, so I didn't say anything.
I don't know why Home Alone popped into my mind like right
I didn't.
before.
I think you were gonna say that.
Yeah, I don't know why Home Alone popped in my mind at that point, but
I don't know either.
go for it, Jeff. Lay it on us.
All right, number 1. Let's talk about The Legend of Zelda.
The Legend of Zelda.
A little game you may have heard of.
It is a little game that you may have heard of.
One of 2 games that came on a gold cartridge.
Ooh,
Because it's bougie like that.
it is. It did.
Number 1 for me is Legend of Zelda, obviously. Legend of Zelda has a special place in my heart. Not just this game, but all of the Zelda games. It's my favorite video game franchise of all time. There's been, many iterations, most of them good, some of them really bad, like Legend of Zelda 2 on the NES.
Just Link.
Yeah. I don't know why they did what they did with that game. But this game, it really sort of set the stage for everything that came after it. A lot of the games at that point were side scrollers. This was an overhead, like looking down. The map was expansive. It was what you would consider open world today, but within the limitations of an 8-bit cartridge. And even though there was a specific direction of like, hey, there's 8 labyrinths that you have to go through. You got to fight 8 bosses to get all the pieces of the Triforce to eventually face Ganon. It was open enough that you could try to maneuver your way through that. And there was no like, yes, you have to go to Labyrinth 1 and to get to it, it's, up 1 and over 5 on the map. Because the cartridges back in the day used to come with instruction books. And this particular game came with a map, like an actual fold-out map that was half the size of this table that we're recording
so cool.
at. But it didn't tell you where anything was on the
Nope.
map. It was just, this is what the world looks like. And you had to figure out the rest on your own. So it starts out, Link spins up on the level. First, you get this opening graphic of like the waterfall and the Legend of Zelda. And
Music hits.
yeah,
That music. Music.
the music. You see the Master Sword and the Triforce and all that. And at that point, you have no idea what the fuck any of that means. But
That's so cool.
but the music, and then the game starts, and you're like, okay, well, what do I do now? And there's one little cave at the top of the first screen, and you go in there, and the guy's like, it's unsafe to go alone. Here, take this.
Who the
and
fuck is that
he
guy?
gives you the sword. Nobody knows.
He's just a guy.
It's
Something
just-
to do with the sword. He's
Just
like, hey, take
some,
the
Hanging out in
just,
the cave.
just some guy
waiting.
with a sword.
It's funny, like, I know I've played Legend of Zelda. I didn't own it, but I know I've played it, I'm sure many times, but before recognizing and understanding, like, it's not safe to go alone, it's such a fucking line that is used
It's
so
iconic.
often
Yeah.
that you don't I didn't realize until recently how important that line actually is, that it's used and people use it. And I think some people probably don't even realize where it's from. They just heard it and like, it's fucking Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
Like everything about Legend of Zelda is big. All of it. Like, so yeah, I sat through a Let's Play for this game as well because again,
That was not 30 minutes, was it, Jones?
it was like 2 hours or an hour and 40.
Couple hours,
It was
yeah.
something like that. It wasn't super long, but it was long. It was I will get up and do some stuff for a while and come back to it while it's playing long. But just the beginning and the music hits, and that music is so incredibly iconic. That sound, and you don't even have to really appreciate Zelda. I mean, Zelda's cool, but I'm not a big Zelda fan. But I love that song. I love what it means. As a gamer, as somebody who's played, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask and all that shit, like I appreciate and understand the importance of that music and how it started so small. Like it didn't mean anything to us, to kids when they first heard it.
Right.
It was like, oh, it's just music. Oh, it's cool. Let's play this game. But now it has gained so much nostalgia and iconic status that you hear the first 3 seconds of it, you know exactly what you're listening to. And that's so cool.
That song is the ringtone on my cell phone. It has been for like 20 years.
That is not a surprise to me.
When Zedge was cool and you could have any ringtone you
I
wanted.
still have it installed on my phone. I never use it. But I still
Well,
have it.
you can't because there's nothing on it. But that was
Really?
your
Oh, shit.
anything that's licensed is gone.
No
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, they stripped that all off.
But that was your ringtone on for that when you called. That was the ringtone. Yours was the X-Men the animated series.
Goddamn right.
So I always liked having custom ringtones for people. But yeah, you're playing The Legend of Zelda, and the lead character of the game is named fucking Link.
Right?
That confuses a lot of people who
does.
don't really know.
Confused a
They're like, oh,
lot of people.
that guy in the green tunic, that's Zelda. You're like,
Yeah,
no, that's
it's
Link.
just
And they're like, no, it's called The Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
And then, no, Zelda is the princess.
Yeah, exactly. Right off the bat, throwing your curveball. You know? You could save in this game,
Yes.
which was one of the biggest aspects of this. You know, the only game that I ever really played that, and I mentioned on the list here earlier, was the Mega Man games. After you beat a level, they gave you a code. So, you know, depending on what way you went through the game and which characters you beat in what order and blah, 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 what you'd have, you'd be able to put in a code to pick up where you left off. And they were able to kind of do that the way the game was played. A lot of other games, you know, once you went through your cavalcade of lives, it was done, you had to start over.
Reset.
Zelda was not like that. Zelda, you could save your progress. And this was one of the first games and one of the only games that really gave you the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, there are. I mean, I don't know how it's 700 plus games, so who knows how many had that option, but not
One,
a ton that I
Jones.
played.
Just one.
No, there was definitely more than that.
I'm sure there were, yeah.
There's definitely more than that.
But Zelda, in great action, great gameplay, open world, right? We're checking off boxes that, you know,
That you didn't know you needed.
That you didn't even know you needed.
Yeah.
That so many games today are based off of, right? But also puzzles, challenges, different things that you didn't know that you needed to do in order to accomplish certain things. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? In the 1980s, when you're playing Zelda, you didn't have internet. You were maybe lucky to get a magazine, a gamer magazine, that would give you some tips. You had to ask your friends what to do, or you had to figure it out. Like, there was no help for you in a game that had all these different puzzles and challenges and hidden areas and things that you had to do and find in order to beat the game. It was just you and your curiosity and your wits to be able to get you through this game, which to me is, I think, why I love this game so much. It is my favorite. It's not my favorite Zelda game. I think Ocarina of Time, for a lot of people, is everybody's
Justifiably
favorite.
so.
But it's easily my favorite Nintendo game. I probably have played this game outside of the Mega Man series and different iterations. I probably played this game the most. You know, I remember when Game Boy Advance was moving things forward and they were porting Nintendo games into the Game Boy Advance. I bought a Game Boy Advance for that reason and got Zelda so I could just play it when I was sitting by the pool. You can actually just buy it. Like, Nintendo sells these things now where it's just an entire version of a game on a handheld. Almost like how like the Tiger Electronics were when we were kids. But it's the entire Zelda game.
I had a
And I think
Spider-Man
Link's
game
in
like
it
that.
too.
God.
They have a couple games on it that you
Pretty
can
wild.
play. It's pretty wild. But its replayability is great as well. And yeah, it's so iconic.
Yeah, and you know, I've loved the Zelda franchise, you know, since this one, and on a personal level. So, you know, I had this game as a kid, and we would play it. My grandfather bought an NES and bought Zelda because those were the types of things that he liked to do. And I remember like going to his house, and he would be like super stoked about what he found in Zelda,
Yeah.
and like what level he was at, and we would like compare notes, and he'd go in with his passwords and, you know, log into a save file, and I'm like, as an 8-year-old kid, like, who would have thought that video games would bring, you know, you and someone 3 generations above you
It's
like
amazing,
together.
actually.
It's like kind of a weird thing to sort of unite through.
You're very fortunate.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, you know, games have a way of bringing people together that you don't necessarily think about sometimes. So like for me, maybe that's why I love Zelda so much.
That's a good
But,
enough reason.
Yeah.
Real talk. That's a good enough reason.
You know, I think Zelda, because I think what you said, Jeff, the game has elements that are very common themes, right? Which we see in a lot of other Nintendo games. You know, you have to save the princess from the monster and things like that, but it does it in such a way that is almost, you know, it's familiar but also unique in how it does it. And, you know, some of the games we talked about, Ghosts and Goblins, Wizards and Warriors, you know, you're playing as characters that end up being knights and have traditional weapons that are based in fantasy and things like that. But this game really is fantasy. This game is Lord of the Rings without it being Lord of the Rings in a lot of ways, right? Which is why I've always kind of said this. That's why we've never gotten a Zelda movie. Because if you make a Zelda movie...
The expectations are too high. You can never get it right.
And Nintendo's very, very protective of their IP where that's concerned. Because I'm sure some people have pitched them about a Zelda movie that would have probably worked. But, you know, if you don't make it like Lord of the Rings, people probably wouldn't like it. I mean, Legolas is basically Link. If you look at that fucking movie.
They made a Legend of Zelda cartoon and made Link out to be like this chauvinistic dickhead.
Yeah.
And so that did not go well.
We don't
No.
talk
So
about
they're like-
that.
One day we will.
So they're like, maybe we shouldn't do
Go back
that.
and watch the Zelda show and the Super Mario show all
Yeah,
over again.
Those weren't the days.
Well, excuse me,
That
princess.
was not good. It wasn't good then, and I
No, it's bad. If
was
you
bad.
watch, if you go back and watch it now, it's even worse.
I didn't like it then.
Yeah.
I know I probably hate it now.
No, it's bad.
And the game, because, you know, when you have a game like this, you know, we talked about, you know, in the games we've talked about, there's a demon that takes the princess. Wizards and Warriors, there's a whole bunch of monsters. Mega Man, you got a named villain in Dr. Wily and stuff like that. But, you know, you have Ganon.
Prince Darkness.
Like, probably, I mean, the second most famous villain, I think, in video games. Definitely way more of a badass than Bowser. Bowser's always been kind of...
Bowser's like a cartoony
He's a
villain.
cartoony villain, right? Ganon's
Ganon's like, I will burn your villages.
I'm going to just lay a waste and a plague upon your people. You know, and the iterations of how they've kind of had Ganon come up in games since then, making him this, you know, he's a wizard who becomes a creature and a monster who's unfathomably powerful. Just lends to that character and the ominous presence that he has. And it all starts in this game.
And that's the mythos of The Legend of Zelda. The Triforce is, you know, wisdom, courage, power, but it's also Link, Zelda, Ganon. Without any one of those, the Triforce doesn't exist. It's like, you know, the balance of the Force, you know, to put it in terms that nerds understand. You know,
this goes back to the treatment Jeff and I wrote like 15 years ago for a Legend of Zelda trilogy movie that'll never get made. But then the people in Nintendo are going to hear this podcast and realize that we get it, and then we're going to get greenlit, Jeff. That's the
sick life
all-
goal.
Hello, Nintendo.
you know, it's going to be great. Next time we go ahead and do this, Jeff's like, you know what, guys, we got new listeners from Japan.
But yeah, Legend of Zelda, man.
Yep, my number one for as well.
I mean, don't get much better in terms of depth, in terms of complexity, in terms of, like, you know, some levels of sort of inventory management. You know.
Yep.
It's a great game. You know, and it spawned an incredible franchise that, you know, love it or hate it, still stands the test of time.
Yeah, and you talk about Nintendo, the NES. How many of those things can we talk about? How many things did they get right in this first iteration of the system? Because you could have got a lot of things wrong. And look, 700 games, they did get a lot of things wrong.
There's
lot.
a metric
There's
ton.
a
There's also
whole
a
lot
metric
wrong.
ton.
Yeah.
But, you know, you've got Mario and everything that's come from that. You've got Metroid, which none of us even talked about Metroid.
There's a
and
reason
the importance
why.
of that.
There's a reason why. What?
What? I'm sorry?
I'll tell you the reason why.
All right, Mike Bay.
It is the singularly biggest drop ball in all of video gaming.
If you're talking about the original Metroid,
I mean, in general now. Like,
Oh.
we're at a point where we could really make some really awesome Metroid games, and they're just like, nah, we're just gonna make Metroid Prime.
Again.
I fucking said it.
Metroid Prime to me is one of the it's one of my absolute favorite video games that I've ever played.
But, I mean, to be fair, how many games have you played in the last 10 years?
Well, fuck you.
I mean, look, man, you're going to say it was one of the greatest you ever played. Well, motherfucker, you played like 5.
All right. Fair. All right, fair.
1 out of 5 ain't bad.
But I'm not, and here's the thing, I'm not saying Metro Prime's bad. I'm not saying any of these games are bad, but they could do so much more than what they do with them. They're so utterly tribal.
That's
with
Nintendo.
And I hate it.
Yeah.
It's a whole conversation we've had too many times,
Yep.
but I hate it.
Sorry.
That's all good. Yeah, but listen, Metroid's awesome. I enjoyed Metroid games when I was young. I still think they're cool. It's been awesome.
There's a lot of potential there,
If
untapped
Nintendo
potential.
grew with me as I became an adult and kept making better games that look better than they do. But hey, who am I? I'm just a consumer. This reminds me, the one and only time Jeff Vandergrift, Jafar here, motherfucked me. I will never forget this day.
I don't even remember.
I remember.
He does.
Pepperidge Farm fucking remembers, Jeff.
You cut me deep that day.
Bad Boys 2 remembers.
Oh, because it was the one of the few times he and I. It wasn't we didn't get into it like we were about to fucking fight. No, it was like we were.
This wasn't Trivial Pursuit Star Wars Episode 3 with me and Noah.
No
No.
friendships were ended that day.
That I wish I could have seen that. Thank God, I'm glad I didn't. But it was we were at the studio. The Noah's band was practicing, and we were all there. And I'm trying to. It was like it was the Wii had already come out or was gonna come out. It was something like that. And I was shit talking how it's gonna look like all the other fucking consoles they make. And I remember Jeff's face, the fire in his eyes. Because I'm like trying to say like I would love some photorealistic graphics from Nintendo for fucking once, and I get on my little high horse about it because I feel like Nintendo 64. All right, cool, good. All right, I'm 16, 17. Let's go. PlayStation, Xbox, and they just went. We're gonna stay being 14 years old. Bye, guys. Bye, Herb. No. We have people over here who want this, whatever this is. We got a Wiimote because apparently people want that. Whatever.
Nobody wanted that.
Fuck
We
that.
bought it, but we didn't want it.
No, just give me a goddamn controller. Anyhow, and Jeff's exact words as I was trying to explain my place on this, he cut me off, his eyes lit with fire, and fucking brimstone said, "Fuck you!" His exact, and I just went, "Oh shit, Jeff, alright." He got so fired up because I was shit talking Nintendo.
You found the nerve.
I was pressing
the
that
nerve.
nerve.
I don't even
Because
remember
I wasn't
that.
making a point.
Sounds like it.
He got fired up at me.
And the best part about that is when that happened, Jones, you probably looked at Jeff and were vindicated. You're like, yep, that's exactly my point.
I mean, I was like, well, shit, all right. Because that was like 10 plus years ago. That was
That was
like,
a while
That was
ago.
like
the
12
studio
plus
was
years ago.
It was at least 10 years ago
I will
for the studio.
never forget Jeff motherfucking me like that. Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Keep
Over
talking
Nintendo.
shit, see what happens.
You listen, you keep talking, son. I'm going to cut you. But yeah, look, Nintendo does what they do, and they do it well. There's an audience for it, so I can't be mad about it. I just wish that I couldn't play their games.
Yeah, I mean, as a fan for as long as I've been, like, yeah, I wish they would put out a Nintendo game that looked like Hellblade.
God, can you imagine the next Zelda game looking anything remotely
Unreal
close
Engine
to that?
5.
I would disintegrate into nothingness and reform as another person.
Somebody's done that. You can go online where they took Zelda and ported it on Unreal Engine 4.
But it doesn't.
and see how
It's
good
not
But
it was.
Nintendo should do it.
It just reminds me
Yeah,
of
I
what
know.
could be.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
won't be because they don't have to. They
Right.
don't have to.
Yeah. They're in their lane and they're staying
They
in
will
it.
stay in it. God bless them. They make a lot of money.
Well, that's how businesses fail.
I hope it doesn't, but
When you rest on your laurels, at some point you become the Sega Genesis system, and then you're just
unfortunate.
producing IP instead of actually hardware. So, actually, no, that's not entirely true at all. Because the reason why Sega went out is because they did push it and people didn't accept it.
man, goddamn, Dreamcast was so good.
We'll
For
talk
another
about
day.
that. We'll talk about that at one point here in the future.
Yes, but you know what? I think this has been an excellent episode. I wasn't sure what to expect going into it.
I wasn't expecting to talk 2.5 hours
Jesus, I
about
did not expect
NES games.
I really
But
did.
yet here we are.
Here we are.
This is a long episode. I apologize, but at the same time, I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate you.
As
Fuck you at the
always,
same time.
we appreciate you for listening today. Next week, more exciting things to come.
Once we figure out what that is.
Once we figure out that,
Once we figure out what that is.
But there will be, though.
yes,
There will be.
yes,
Yeah.
and we'll be there, and we hope that you're there. So thanks for listening.
Is wrestling coming up next?
It is.
Wrestling is next.
WrestleMania season.
We are in WrestleMania
Listen,
season.
we'll cover a WrestleMania for sure.
Yeah.
For those of you that like the wrestling episodes, all 6 of you, you'll enjoy it. The rest of you, well, there's always another episode after
Deal
that.
with it.
But
Yeah.
maybe you should listen to it because it'll be a good WrestleMania episode.
I keep telling everybody that. I think the wrestling episodes we do are some of the better
They
episodes we
are
do.
because there's so much to chew on. There's so much to
Yeah.
talk about. So, and if it's a WrestleMania, that means it's probably gonna be like
we-
3 hours
Man,
long.
do we sound like wrestling fans trying to like pitch wrestling?
Come
to
on, guys.
non-wrestling
Just fucking
fans?
listen.
You will not dislike it. Promise. You can just pick a match and just YouTube it as we talk about it. How about that? But anyhow, everybody stay safe out there. And it's cold. It's crappy weather here, at least in the eastern seaboard. I don't know what it's like the rest of the world where you guys are.
Well,
But
it's winter in March finally.
fuck yeah. Well, it snowed a little bit, unfortunately. But thanks again on behalf of the gentlemen here at Nothing Good Studios. This is Doc signing off with Jafar and Mac.
See you next week.
Nothing good.